Daha
Okay.
değil galiba. Ha tamam. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second day of the Digitalization and Feminism workshop. Can you hear me well? It's okay? All right. So today we are moving to our second afternoon or morning of discussion, depending on where you are. I just want to give a quick reminder of some technicalities. The first thing is that when you enter the room, please make sure to put your full name so we can know who you are. Remember also to choose the language in the link of in the interpretation icon, and choose the language that you want to hear the workshop. Remember that Turkish is actually named Korean because there's no option to place it Turkish. So those who want to listen to it in Turkish should put Korean. Also remember, please, to speak slowly so that the interpreters can have time to translate what we are saying. I will start by doing a quick recap of what we discussed yesterday. Then I will pass the floor to Ankita and Kuala from IT for Change. After that, we will have a discussion about digitalization and feminist activism. And we will finish with a wrap up in which we will briefly discuss what are the next steps. What can we do in the future to continue discussing this topic? So yesterday we had a very rich day. We started by making a broad discussion about what is the digital economy and what is at stake in the digital economy. An important topic that came out was the power of transnational corporations in the technology and communication and information sectors, and how data is becoming the unit of power. No, Ankita mentioned that data is becoming like oil was at one time, and how we as feminists need to pay attention to data rights and to fight for data rights, but also against the domination of transnational corporations in the technology sphere. Then we had a big discussion about labor issues, what is happening in the realm of work, and what are the impacts of digitalization on workers, the challenges for trade unions, how the structural problems of our societies are reproduced in the digital sphere. Also about digital violence and how violence is reproduced in social media, in the digital sphere, but also how the digital sphere is becoming also a increasing place for sexual harassment, for trafficking, recruiting of women, for sex work or prostitution, and how we need to come up with alternative infrastructures to counter this violence online. We also had a very rich discussion about digitalization and education, the impacts of distance learning in the labor conditions, but also health conditions of professors, students, and families. Also a discussion about digital law and women. And I think it was became very clear for us the importance of having public services, of ensuring that health and education will remain public services and rights for everyone to have access to. We also discussed about the rights to disconnect, and how the inequalities in internet access reveal uneven relations between people, between countries, between regions. So now I will pass the floor to Ankita and Kuala. They are part of a organization called IT for Change, which is based in India. And they do a very, very nice work there. I recommend strongly that you check their website, because there are many resources that can be very useful for us. And thank you, Ankita and Kuala, for being here with us today. I pass the floor to you.
Thanks a lot, Mariana. That was actually a very brilliant gist of what happened yesterday, because I think Kola and I are going to try and build on the conversation, on the rich, really rich conversation that took place yesterday, because all of you actually made our task really easy. We had to sit and be like, we don't need to discuss this today because yesterday everyone discussed about it in detail. So yeah, we are really excited about the workshop today, but we would want to say that we want to make this a workshop. So we want everyone to participate. We want everyone to interact. So whenever we discuss anything, any concept, if you think of any examples that you'd like to share with the group, or if you think of anything that you've encountered in your workspace, in your real life, which is related to what we are talking about, please feel free to jump in, write in the chat box. And anyone in the group, if we are not looking at the chat box while talking, you can just alert to it, and then we'll stop and we can talk about it. This is not a presentation. We would like to say that in the beginning. This is just a workshop where we'd like to discuss about a lot of things that we talked about yesterday, but more taking it to the next level, where we are going to start talking about, one is obviously debating the politics of our digital presence, but also going into the layers of that politics, understanding where all of it is coming from. And we are also going to try and explain a few definitions, terms that are used when we are talking about the digital capitalism, data capitalism, when we are talking about our digital presence. So for a more meaningful engagement with this paradigm, it is important for all of us to place those terms in a specific politics. So Koala and I are going to try and do that over the next, I don't know, 1 hour, how much ever time it takes. And obviously, our knowledge and our information on all of this is also limited. It comes from whatever we've read, whatever we've worked on. So the more you add to it, the richer this workshop will become. We'll be able to, all of us will be able to learn more. So reiterating what I said in the beginning, please feel free to jump in whenever you have anything to say or any examples to add, or even any questions to ask. We'd be more than happy to take it at that time. With that, I would actually like to begin this with an activity, so that we're all on the same platform. So the activity goes like this: we all do Google search. We go to the Google tab and we do Google search, which is something that we all do. So we type keywords over there and it gives us some results, right? We type a few keywords and we get the results on the Google page. So this is what I'd like all of us to do now. I have put 4 words in the box. One is secretary, one is hot, beautiful, and sports. I want all of us to go on the Google search bar and type one by one all 4 of those words and go to the images. Click on the images section. And whatever your observations are, like when I see something, for example, when I'm seeing my screen right now, I see faces and I see a presentation, right? So the 2 words that I can describe that I see on my screen right now is faces and a presentation. So if you can also record your observations, I'm going to put a link in the chat pane. So if you go to that link, you will see slides over there. You can type your observations in those slides and then we can share it with the group. Is it clear? Was I clear? Was I able to explain? So we go do a Google search on these 4 words, and whatever our observations are in 3 words, We type it in the presentation that I will put in the chat pane. Can we do that? Okay. So we start now. I will just type the presentation link. Yeah, whatever language you're comfortable in. But if your observations you can record in English and put the words in English, it will be helpful. Otherwise, you can put those 3 words in the chat pane and the translators can put it in the presentation. So I have around 10 people who've responded. We'll wait for 2 more minutes so that if there is any translation happening.
Perhaps if someone needs help with translation, they could write in the chat so we know for this the Spanish speaking and the Turkish speaking as well.
Mariana, there is something in the chat box. Is that a question or?
The person has shared what she found in her search.
Okay.
Sorry.
So can someone put it in the presentation in English if possible?
Okay, thanks.
So we'll just give 1 more minute and then I'll probably present the screen. Okay, so I think we will share the results now. And in all honesty, okay, there are things coming in the chat pane as well. Uh, yeah, quite a lot of people have typed in the chat pane. Anyway, so I'm going to share the screen. As and when the translators can keep putting it in, it will keep displaying. So that shouldn't be an issue. So here's what we all typed in. For secretary and sports, these are the observations that people had when they looked at their images section of the Google search result. The maximum typed word in both of those categories was women. The second was secretary, and because probably they typed it, and then women with few clothes, men playing football, breast, secretary women, we see women, no man is secretary, bikini, female body, naked women. For hot and beautiful. I think people didn't get to the second slide. I think everyone typed in the first slide, but that's fine. I think we have the answers that we needed. Okay, this was actually easy. I don't have to do much talking. The screen says a lot of things. If anyone would like to share their observations about what we see on the screen right now, to just talk about where do you think all of this is coming from? Why is it that we are all sitting in different parts of the world? and we are all doing Google search of the same words, but there are certain patterns that we see to this search. So, and the pattern of, and that pattern is what we see on the screen right now. Would anyone like to share their observations about this? Yeah, please go ahead.
Evet, cinsiyetçi öncelikle. Oldukça cinsiyetçi. Kadın kelimesi direkt çıkıyor ve işte belden aşağı yani pornografik, vücudu öne çıkaran, insan bakışından gerçekten uzak bir meta halinde göstermiş kadını. Bu kelimelerle arama yaptığımızda zaten toplumda da bu kavramlar genelde bu tarzda kullanılır kadınlar için maalesef. Bu da toplumsal cinsiyet eşitsizliğinin getirdiği şeylerden. Teşekkürler.
Brilliant. I think, yeah, that's exactly what we wanted to, what we are going to talk about during our presentation. Would anyone else like to say anything? Any other observations that you'd like to share?
Ben de ek olarak şey söylemek istiyorum. Mesela hak savunuculuğu yaparken, dijital
Yeah.
aktivizm yaparken görsellere ihtiyacımız oluyor. Ve bunu biz normal dil, yani uygun, ideal bir dille yazarken bile çıkan görseller anti söylemler üzerinden yaratılmış söylemler üzerinden üretilmiş görseller oluyor. Bu da ayrı bir şey. Yani ulaşmak istediğin dili yazsan bile o dilin karşılığının görmediğini görüyorsun.
Perfect. I think that summarizes the discussion that we are going to have in the next two slides. Thanks a lot for saying that. So basically what the idea is, Hala, I'm going to stop screen share now. Maybe you can, yeah. So the reason that we did this activity was because when we do Google search, which is actually right now an everyday activity for all of us, we see it as a result which we are getting of something that we are putting in on a machine. And we look at all of this as mathematical calculations. We look at this as, oh, so it's making our lives easy because now I can get whatever information I want from wherever I want it. It's almost like walking into a bookstore, right? You get into a bookstore and you know what books you want and you pick it from there. But then what we realized during this activity was, are you really choosing what book you're picking? When I typed the word beautiful, I had in mind beautiful sceneries. I had hill stations. I had river views in mind. But when I type the word beautiful, all I see is blonde, white women wearing a particular kind of clothes, particular kind of hair length. And that is not my definition of beautiful. Then where is all of this coming from? And how is it getting reproduced? Which is the conversation which we'd like to have now with the following slides. And so basically what we saw over there was Google's algorithmic conceptualizations of a variety of people and ideas. So Google conceptualizes these things in Google's head. So what is this Google's head that we're talking about is basically what we call artificial intelligence. So just like human beings learn from different things that we see around us, we learn from our experiences, we learn from constantly reading about something. The computers, the systems that we operate also learn from the data that we put in. One is learning from that data, and the second is the algorithms that are written to produce and process that data. Now, those algorithms are also written by human beings, right? So what we saw right now was a representation of that sort of a bias, which is very easy for an algorithm, for an artificial intelligence system to reproduce. Because the human beings are processing this, the human beings are using this, the human beings are putting in that data, it gets processed in the same manner. whether looking for auto suggestions or answers to various questions, or looking for notions about what is beautiful or what a professor may look like, Google's dominant narratives reflect the kinds of hegemonic frameworks and notions that are often resisted by women and people of color. But we see that Google is replicating that, and we see that our Google search, which is a normal activity,
Sorry,
continuously
Ankita.
builds on that.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but Spanish-speaking sisters are having problem with interpretation. They lost interpretation.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Do you want me to repeat what I said? Frameworks and notions that are often resisted by women and people of color. We see that
Sorry, may I interrupt? Also, in English channel, there are two sounds. There is one background sound from the video.
Sisters are having problem with interpretation. I'm speaking now. Sorry. Can someone in the I will compañeras que están en el español.
Şu an İspanyolca kanalındayız arkadaşlar. Çevirmen arkadaşlar. Burada ses yok
¿Tienen
İspanyolca kanalında.
interpretación?
Galiba ikiniz de İngilizce kanalındasınız.
En el canal español. Compañeras, ¿tienen interpretación? ¿O no?
Şu an ben duyabiliyorum İspanyolca kanalında. Evet.
There is no interpretation to Spanish. Compañeras, ¿tienen interpretación? ¿O no?
It happened because of
Şu an ben duyabiliyorum İspanyolca kanalında.
it happened because of the wrong channel. Interpreters.
There is no interpretation to Spanish. What should we do? Should we
It happened because of it happened because of the wrong channel. Interpreters.
There is no interpretation to Spanish. What should we do? Should we
Hocam şimdi bizim hala aynı sorun devam ediyor. Canlı yayın biraz geriden geliyor. Ben konuştuktan 1-2 dakika sonra sesim ekrandan tekrar veriliyor. Yani
¿alguna intérprete en español puede hablar para hacer el test, por favor?
arkadan gürültü yapıyor. Hocam şimdi bizim hala anladım. Devam ediyor. Canlı yayın biraz geriden geliyor. Ben konuştuğumda
We cannot hear sisters.
Excuse me, someone. Mariana, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. People in the Spanish channel are saying that now it's fine. Now interpretation is fine. So maybe
I think there isn't any problem now.
okay, it's okay. Should we move on?
Excuse me, someone.
Someone
Yıldız,
is
can you-
open the YouTube stream, I think. Could it be possible to close the YouTube stream, please?
Okay, now we can move on. Sorry, Ankita. Go ahead, please.
No, perfectly fine. So now the Spanish interpreter is available, is it? Okay, great. So, okay. So what I was discussing was, we were talking about the fact that when we do these Google searches represent certain technical things that go into making these searches, this data, this digital platform available for us. One of that is the processing of the data. To begin with, there is a data that is generated, which we will deal with in the coming slides. That data is processed through algorithms, and that data is processed through artificial intelligence. So that processed data then is given to us, which we see on our screens. And what is artificial intelligence? As I was talking about that example where we have our biases about what we want to read, we have our own experiences that we build from, and we have our own knowledge systems. So when we walk into a bookstore, we look at a book and we pick it because it serves our purpose, because that is the book we would like to read. Similarly, a computer system, in a lot of different ways that we will also talk about, picks that information that the computer system, the artificial intelligence, thinks is the best for your screen and shows it to you. Now, what derives the agenda, what defines what that artificial intelligence is showing to you, what defines what those algorithms are showing to you, is what we'll discuss in the coming slides. So artificial intelligence, in simple words, is how machines and computers are self-learning. So when you repeatedly feed something to the system learns from it. If I am constantly going and checking on certain websites where I am checking clothes to buy, the next time that I go on to a Facebook or to a YouTube, it will show me advertisements on the side. We've seen that, right? We've all seen it. So the system learns from that data when we put it, and the system processes it accordingly. That is what is artificial intelligence. And all of this processing happens through certain instructions that are given to the computer. And those certain instructions are algorithms. Now, these algorithms are usually called mathematical calculations. They're scientific, they're neutral, they're data processing systems, they're problem solving systems. These are the terms that are used for algorithms generally. But for us to be able to understand whether this is what algorithms really are, if algorithms were really that neutral, then why is it that if I type the word beautiful, I only see women in small clothes, white women, blonde women, specific type of women who are defined as beautiful? I don't see that as neutral. Do we see that as neutral? It is not neutral. There is something that goes behind those algorithms as well, because those algorithms are written by human beings, who are biased. So this is artificial intelligence, and this is how we look at algorithms. Talking about what are our everyday interactions with artificial intelligence, we just wanted to make us think about, when we talk about artificial intelligence, it looks like this distant idea where, okay, these robots are going to rule over the world and then there is going to be apocalypse. Artificial intelligence is not that. Artificial intelligence is pervading our lives right now, right at this moment. Even when we are using the Zoom platform, even when we are having this interaction, there is an artificial intelligence at work here. Very simple examples of our everyday interactions with artificial intelligence is Alexa, the speaker that we speak to and we give instructions, even the Google Siri. So those are very simple artificial intelligence that we use in our everyday lives. Another very simple thing that all of us must have witnessed is when we are searching for videos on YouTube, on the side you will always see play next, and this is a video that you will like to watch. More often than not, the video that YouTube suggests as the play next video is the video that you would like to watch. How is that happening? Because that is your system building its own intelligence on the basis of the data that you have fed into it with your previous YouTube searches. So that's the level of accuracy that this system is gaining now. Then even your email filters on Gmail. What email will go into spam? What email will go into your social section? What email will go into your primary section? We don't decide it, do we? Gmail decides it for us. But more often than not, those decisions are right decisions. We want those emails to be put in those different sections. The product recommendations in online shopping, the bill pay reminders, the maps and directions to find the quickest routes that are available that we use. All of those are our everyday interactions with artificial intelligence. Now, how much of those everyday interactions are non-biased, neutral, how much of those are devoid of any sort of misrepresentation? We would like to explain that through a video.
Hi Ankita, will you be playing the video? I've stopped my screen sharing already.
Okay. I'll play the video 1 second. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Algorithms are everywhere, from powering our internet search results to taking out the guesswork in our online shopping experience. They are everywhere. We use and trust them each and every day to make countless decisions for us. Despite their seemingly neutral mathematical nature, algorithms, however, aren't necessarily any more objective than humans, because at the end of the day, they are written by people. And this is where the phenomenon of algorithmic bias comes into play. It has many examples. Like when Nikon cameras equipped with the blink detection feature wouldn't snap photos of many of its Asian users because the software thought their eyes were never open. Or how Amazon's Alexa struggles to recognize different accents, and when Google Translate insistently associates certain jobs with certain genders, while translating sentences with gender-neutral pronouns from languages like Turkish, Finnish, and Chinese. In 2015, Google's photo recognition tool mistakenly tagged a photo of 2 Black people as gorillas. Meanwhile, in the US, a crime predicting algorithm wrongly labeled Black people reoffenders at nearly twice the rate of white people. You see the pattern here? Algorithm bias is rooted in the way AI, artificial intelligence algorithms work, by using what's called machine learning and deep learning, which are both ways in which computers make decisions. Both are simply dependent on data, a huge amount of it, and ultimately the people who feed the data. So let's say we have an image classification algorithm. When you have that algorithm, data like millions of photos correctly labeled as a mug, it will be able to detect other pictures of mugs by comparing it to a set of characteristics it has learned thanks to its database. Similarly, a speech recognition algorithm transcribes words by comparing it to the millions of voice samples that it got earlier. The more labeled data an algorithm is trained on, the better the outcome will be. However, if there's too little data or too much unspecific data, these algorithms will have some blind spots. Here is where the problem of algorithmic bias comes into play. There is generally a person or a group of people who decide what goes into the sample data set the machine learns from. So if a camera company teaches its AI to detect open eyes and has used Caucasians as its main data set, then it's easy to see how the blink detection would be triggered when an Asian person steps into frame. This is an example of the algorithms in question, not trained with enough or related data in order to produce correct results. So what's really important to remember here is that behind every algorithm, there are people. And of course, that person's set of values and beliefs, ethnicity, and cultural intelligence all play a part. These mistakes were perhaps unintentional, but the potential for software products to accidentally adopt some bias is serious. And as more industries which have a deep impact on people's lives turn to technology, and specifically to algorithms in services like school admissions, job applications, insurance rates, and credit scores, a significant question arises. Can algorithms really yield fair results? And whose responsibility is it to ensure that companies and people who create these systems are doing so in the spirit of social equality?
Was everyone able to view the video? Was the audio clear? Okay. So the reason that we showed that video was because we wanted to highlight these, which is how are these systems perpetuating discrimination? There are ways in which the algorithms, the artificial intelligence, and we'll come to the data angle of it, is perpetuating the discrimination that we as feminists, we are trying to fight. There are ways in which the social, the physical manifestations of these discriminations are finding their own ways and their own paths into the digital space, that we see today, the digital space that we interact with, and the digital space that we want to use for our activism, and the digital space that we need to question today because of these things. So if you look at the diagram, it clearly depicts that there is obviously these biased individuals that define who's more qualified, who's not qualified, that defines, for example, our Google search shows it, that defines what is the typical image of a sportswoman or what is the typical image of a secretary that comes to mind. Then there is a mismanagement of indigenous data, obviously. There is a data and then the biased data sets, as that image describes it so beautifully. The data tries to put it in a sequence, whereas the reality is not that sequenced. The reality has so many social biases and so many differences to it, because as individuals, we're very different people. And then obviously we also talked about how algorithms are biased. And this is how artificial intelligence is shaping the gender relations. The first layer is its design. Women do not, and I think this was discussed in a presentation yesterday, women do not have an active role in deciding what technologies define our lives today. Women do not interact with that platform. They are not present on that platform. They are not designing those technologies. So they do not get to define or decide what stereotypes are reproduced online. Second layer is related to the deployment of such technologies, where the artificial intelligence is used to reduce the gender inequality, but it can also exacerbate gender inequality. The third layer is related to the effect of the digitization strategies on the future of work and advancement of opportunities for women, which we extensively discussed under women, labor, and digital platform in the presentation yesterday. And then finally, the most important thing, which we might want to discuss in the coming sessions, as Mariana talked about more such workshops in the future, is how there are certain countries that do not have that sort of data that they can use to process their own data, process their own information, and benefit from. So even here, what we see is a new form of colonialism that is happening. And we will discuss it through how that happens with data. Why we've talked about artificial intelligence, we've talked about algorithms, we've talked about how the algorithms are biased. We move on to our next discussion, which is how do we look at all of this in context of the data that we produce when we are interacting with the digital space, and how this data is what goes into processing the artificial intelligence and processing how this data feeds into the system that processes all of it. So these are the words that we would like everyone to keep in mind when we talk about data. Is data our right? Is data affecting the sovereignty of the nations around the world? What is data extractivism? Is data a public good? What is the geopolitics around data? What do you mean by localization of the data? Is data used for surveillance? What is big tech? Is data leading to colonialism? What is the data infrastructure and how does that define it? And also privacy, which is something that I think we discuss a lot of times around the data that we share. Now we'd like to ask you a simple question, and we'd want everyone to maybe just type in the chat pane. It's a small quiz. What do you think is data? So whatever you think your answer is, A, B, C, or D, just you can type it in the chat pane.
If there's answers that go beyond the 4 options, that's also welcome.
Wow. Yeah. So I think a lot of people have said, I am data. So if anyone would like to go ahead and maybe say what they feel when they say I am data, and what did they mean when they said that they feel A is the right answer.
Well, I can go. I thought of I am data because right now everything that we do, our bodies can be a source of data. For instance, that are apps that track women's period, and it becomes data for pharmaceutical industries, for instance. So I was thinking about these kinds of things when I thought of I am data as an answer.
Perfect. I think we are going to talk about it. Anyone who thinks data is a Lego block which can be used to build on, uh, would you like to explain or share your thoughts? Or anyone who said data is a resource and they feel D was the right answer?
Ben söz alabilir miyim? Ağ derken aslında kaynak ve yapı inşa etmek için kullanılacak bir araç olması için A'yı seçtim. Yani benden yola çıkarak olan bir şey. Benim yani bizim veri olduğumuzu anlamam şöyle oldu. Arkadaşım ölmüştü. Haberlere çıktı. Daha ölüm kayıtları netleşmeden sigortacılar aradı direkt olarak yani. Oradan hemen internet haberlerinden ya da işte kaynaklarından onun öldüğü ve aslında sigortayla ilgili olan şeyleri halletmek için yani bizim taziyemiz daha oluşurken yani o aşamadayken direkt onlar iş başındaydı.
Wow. Yes. That's
Ee,
exactly the kind of example we were thinking of. Yeah, I think someone else unmuted themselves.
Ben de hem evet. Hı. Ben kaynak olduğunu da düşünüyorum, data olduğunu da düşünüyorum. Verilerimiz alınıyor. Mesela en çok da araştırmacılar bunu çok kullanıyorlar verileri çalışmalarında. Onun dışında birçok şirketler, telefon şirketleri, marketler, sağlık kuruluşları vesaire her yerde verilerimiz paylaşılıyor bizden izinsiz. Ve başka bir zaman bize mesajlar geliyor. Şunu alın, bunu yapın vesaire gibi. Bu da onlar için bir kaynak oluyor. Kesinlikle güvenli değil bu anlamda ama kullanılıyoruz her anlamda.
Perfect. I think exactly the kind of answers and discussion that we wanted to trigger for what we're going to discuss next. So data in that way is actually all three of those. And we are going to basically discuss now how we can look at data in those three ways. First is data as a commodity, which is the building block. So basically, how is data, what is a commodity? A commodity in economic terms is something that has value that I can sell in the market. And that is exactly what data is. So what happens is, for example, when Facebook is collecting data about you, Facebook can take that data and go and sell it to the advertising companies that can show the advertisements that you then can use to buy more products online. So your data that way becomes a commodity which is traded in the market with a certain value and extracts a certain value, which is which generates money in the process. And that is how our data becomes commodity. The second way of looking at data is what we called data as a resource or data as capital. So when we were discussing about data as oil yesterday, now oil is something which was a natural resource that we had to extract and then trade in the market. But data wasn't a resource which was lying around like that. Data was created, data was generated, data was processed. In how is data acting as a capital now? The textbook definition of capital, or how Marxist analysis explained capital to us, was you bring the money to the market or you bring the capital to the market and you use it to generate value. And that is exactly what data is doing for us now. Data is not just traded as a commodity, but more and more commodities are made to generate more and more data. What we have in effect right now is we have more smart technology. I think someone was talking about smart technology yesterday and how smart is being integrated in environment, smart ecology, smart devices. Those are the commodities that are produced to generate more and more data. And this so the Google the artificial intelligence researcher who works with Google had once said that we don't even think when we are generating data, because what purpose we will use that data. It is not like today I will generate your data thinking I will use this data in a specific manner. The data is just generated as a resource which the capitalists keep with themselves for some use that they will define in the future, and they are generating data on a daily basis. So there is this continual capturing, continual generation and continual circulation of data in the system. And finally, we look at data as bodies. And this is something that there were a few examples that came up in the discussion yesterday. And of an example that just now Sharife and Mariana also shared. How do we look at data as bodies? I remember this workshop that I attended where a transgender woman, sex worker, activist from Turkey, had specifically mentioned, her name is Janset Kalan, and she had mentioned about this episode where recently, during the lockdown, there, the place where they stay, they did not get ration. So the government was sending ration to, as in the necessity commodities, the government was supplying food and all to the people in lockdown for support. But their community did not get it. And how do you think that is happening? The example that Mariana shared about Switzerland yesterday, she said that the feminist circles were not allowed to hold their meetings. Do you think the government is, or the police, or whoever is trying to stop these things from happening, how do they come to know about all of these things? So there are physical manifestations of the data that we produce online. We go online, we talk about certain things online. That data is then used to surveil our bodies. So necessarily what is happening is we are becoming data, which was our answer first, where very good examples were shared. I am data. I am becoming data because everything that I do is being generated and processed as data about me, which has physical manifestations and results that I experience in real life. And it is not just something that happens on the computer. And that is how we look at data as bodies. So those were the three ways in which we define data: resources, data as a resource or as capital, data as a commodity, and data as bodies. So let's see how this happens. And for that, we'd like to show a small clip.
If it places an ad, it will be successful. That's their business. They sell certainty. In order to be successful in that business, you have to have great predictions. Great predictions begin with one imperative. You need a lot of data.
Many people call this surveillance capitalism. Capitalism profiting off of the infinite tracking of everywhere everyone goes by large technology companies whose business model is to make sure that advertisers are as successful as possible.
This is a new kind of marketplace now. It's a marketplace that never existed before. And it's a marketplace that trades exclusively in human futures. Just like there are markets that trade in pork belly futures or oil futures. We now have markets that trade in human futures at scale. And those markets have produced the trillions of dollars that have made the internet companies the richest companies in the history of humanity.
What I want people to know is that everything they're doing online is being watched, is being tracked, is being measured. Every single action you take is carefully monitored and recorded. Exactly what image you stop and look at, for how long you look at it. Oh yeah, seriously, for how long you look at it. They know when people are lonely, they know when people are depressed, they know when people are looking at photos of your ex-romantic partners, they know what you're doing late at night, they know the entire thing. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, or what kind of neuroses you have, what your personality type is like.
They have more information about us than has ever been imagined in human history. It is unprecedented.
And so all of this data that we're just pouring out all the time is being fed into these systems that have almost no human supervision and that are making better and better and better and better predictions about what we're going to do and who we are.
A lot of people have the misconception that it's our data being sold. It's not in Facebook's business interest to give up the data. What do they do with that data? They build models that predict our actions, and whoever has the best model wins.
The scrolling speed is slow, nearing the end of its average session length, decreasing outload, pull back on friends and family.
On the other side of the screen, it's almost as if they have this avatar voodoo doll, like model of us. All of the things we've ever done, all the clicks we've ever made, all the videos we've watched, all the likes, that all gets brought back into building a more and more accurate model. The model, once you have it, you can predict the kinds of things that person does.
Right, let me just test.
Where you're gonna go. I can predict what kind of videos will keep you watching. I can predict what kinds of emotions tend to trigger you.
Yes, perfect. The most epic fails of the year. Perfect, that worked. Following with another video. Beautiful. Let's squeeze a sneaker before it starts.
At a lot of these technology companies, there's three main goals. There's the engagement goal to drive up your usage, to keep you scrolling. There's the growth goal to keep you coming back and inviting as many friends and getting them to invite more friends. And then there's the advertising goal to make sure that as all that's happening, we're making as much money as possible from advertising. Each of these goals are powered by algorithms whose job is to figure out what to show you to keep those numbers coming up.
We often
So we just wanted to share that small clip from this movie called The Social Dilemma, which is available online for everyone to watch. And I would really recommend that we should all go and watch that movie whenever we get the time. So basically, that's what is happening. Basically, they're creating digital clones of us to use, to process, and to sell in the market. And the original promise of the internet was the emancipatory forms of being and doing through a new form of collaboration, new careers, participation, and wealth creation. But in reality, what is happening? I'd like Khala to come and discuss that with you. I think Khala is going to start with a case story for everyone to be able to participate and understand what she's going to be talking about.
Thanks, Ankita. I have stopped my screen share. If you can take it from here. So there's a short case story that we have prepared. I will read out the situation to you, and we can perhaps discuss the situation around some key questions that we have formulated. Women's sexual and reproductive rights, a women's group. What's Facebook got to do with it? Before we get into the case study, these are commonly known facts, but facts that it would serve us to remember while going through the situation is that Facebook emerged as a social networking site. The primary function of the social networking site is to connect people who may be geographically dispersed. So the idea was to serve a social function of connecting people. The other fact that we know is that today Facebook constitutes one of the big tech companies in terms of the social, political, and economic power it has in the global economy. So, keeping these two facts in the background, we can proceed to the situation at hand. Saheli and Facebook. Saheli is a women's rights organization working in rural areas in Bangladesh on sexual and reproductive health and rights. In this context, sexuality is a taboo topic and open discussions on this issue are difficult. The Saheli team over the past 2-3 years has noticed that in the villages in its operational areas, there is increasing smartphone diffusion and women have started to own their own phones. Last month, representatives from Facebook's Free Basics team in the country approached the organization and suggested that they enter into a partnership to launch a sexual and reproductive health information service on the Free Basics platform, directed at rural women in Saheli's areas of work. If you can go to the next slide.
Sorry, it's a warning. You are speaking in the off, so we cannot hear your voice in the English channel. You need to repeat your speech from the beginning and choose your channel as English.
Okay, so this is actually an issue that I was facing that I thought I would be able to work it out with Ankita's help. It's perhaps due to the version of the application that I have, but I've not been getting the option to switch languages. So I've just been running with it, and as and when someone's speaking, when I get the audio in English, when it's being spoken in English, but otherwise I'm hearing Spanish and Turkish. I wouldn't know how to overcome that at this stage. I do not have the option to change the language.
Merhabalar. Şöyle yapabiliriz. İngilizce duymak isteyen arkadaşlar off'ta dinleyebilirler.
Okay, you can unmute yourself, no?
I am unmuted.
Me? Sorry, it's just what I can propose is that those who are in the English channel, they stop the option of silencing the original audio. So everyone will be able to hear you, because I am in the English channel and I can hear Huala. So please, everyone who is in the English channel, put the original audio on, so you will be able to hear Huala.
I'll wait for a bit if others are turning on their original sound. Does that solve the issue for everyone? Will people across languages be able to hear me?
Is everyone being able to hear Huala in the English channel? If someone has a problem, please say now. I think you should go ahead, Huala, but you will need to repeat.
I'll start from the beginning, no worries.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Ankita, we'll just go back to the earlier slide. So this is a case study that I wanted to begin with, a case study of a women's group that works on women's sexual and reproductive rights in Bangladesh. and how Facebook tried to enter the situation and how things panned out subsequently. So women's sexual and reproductive rights, what's Facebook got to do with it? Two facts to keep in mind that we have established over time is that we know Facebook to have started as a social networking platform which serves a primarily social function of connecting people. And now another fact we know is that Facebook constitutes one of the big tech companies that exert an inordinate amount of economic and political power in the global economy. Saheli is a women's rights organization working in rural areas in Bangladesh on sexual and reproductive health rights. Sexuality in this context is a taboo topic and open discussions are difficult. The Saheli team over the past 2-3 years has noticed that in the villages there is increasing smartphone diffusion and women have started to own their phones. Last month, representatives from Facebook's Free Basics team in the country approached the organization and suggested that they enter into a partnership to launch a sexual and reproductive health information service on the Free Basics platform. The Free Basics team was also willing to commit to local language interface development and technical support for the tie-up. The Saheli team's interest was piqued. As Free Basics was a zero-service platform, this meant that women could access this service without spending any amount from their limited data plans. The Saheli team then went on to explore more about the offer that was being made to them and also started conversing with digital rights activists who would probably have more to say on the situation. They learned that Free Basics is a privately owned platform, which meant that any partnership with them could be discontinued at any point in the future. Facebook was not bound to see their work through till the end. Data about user activities on the platform would also be captured and tracked and stored by Facebook. These two issues worried the team at Saheli a little bit. Ankita, can we go ahead? Yet, they eventually decided to go ahead with the partnership. One of the members from the women's group Saheli used the example of water supply to justify the decision, saying that when there is no water supply, even getting water for 2 hours a day is a good thing. I think that for the women we work with, having some access to the internet is better than none. But of course, I agree that when we go on our field visits, we should take care to tell women that what they are accessing is not the full internet, but only a limited part. Eventually, given these caveats and these challenges, the women's group, but also the promise and lure that the platform was offering, they accepted the partnership. So this is the situation at hand. There are 3 questions that we can attempt to answer around this situation. First of them being, do we think that Saheli made the right decision by accepting the offer of partnership made by Facebook? I mean, anyone who has thoughts on this, whether Saheli made a good decision, if yes, why, and if not, why?
Can I ask for a clarification?
Sure.
The Free Basics is a platform that belongs to Facebook?
Correct, it is.
And then the case is that the women in the Saheli organization, they wanted to access, to find a way to talk to these women who are using more and more smartphones about sexuality.
Correct. Yeah.
And then they had to choose between allying with Facebook.
Yeah, whether to partner with Facebook or not, because Facebook offered a way to deliver information about a sensitive but equally important topic to these women in areas where having face-to-face conversations or group conversations about the subject was difficult for both social cultural barriers and also information deficits. And the Facebook in question here is the Facebook that we know, the Mark Zuckerberg Facebook. So anyone has thoughts about whether Saheli's decision to offer the partnership was good or not, or whether they think it was yes, it was a good decision, but certain caveats. Any thoughts on this?
Söyleyeyim mi?
Zeynep, go ahead.
Bir dakika. Kanalı seçeyim. Do I have to go on from the off channel or from Turkish channel? I'm
Do you want to speak in Turkish or in English?
Both sides is okay, but I need to choose Korean part to be translated, right? Okay.
If you want to be translated from Turkish to English, you need to be in the Korean channel.
Tamam, öyle daha rahat olur yani akış için. Ya bunun ben kesin bir evet, kesin bir hayır cevabı olabilecek bir şey olduğunu düşünmüyorum. Yani bu güçlendirme pratiklerinde de oluyor ya. İşte Hindistan'da küçük bütçeler veriliyor kadınlara. Bir dolu eksisi var. İşte aslında bir kısmı o bütçelerin erkeklere yarıyor vesaire. Ama bir yandan da kadınları kamusal sahaya taşıyan şeyler bunlar. Karar verme mekanizmalarına hiç ulaşamayacakların kısmen ulaşmasını sağlayan şeyler. Dolayısıyla aslında yerelde kendilerine iyi bir şey olacağını düşünerek kendileri karar verdiyse onlar adına doğru bir karar, ama tabii ki bir şirketle baş başa oldukları için muhtemelen negatif yanları da olacak diye düşünüyorum.
So since I still have the language issue, I'm waiting on Ankita to translate the response for me.
Okay. Because you cannot hear.
I quickly typed whatever was being translated and I sent it to you.
All right. So, so far as I understand, what was shared is that there is no clear yes or no answer. Empowerment in India or in different contexts is contextual. On one hand, it will be good because it gives women access to internet and therefore like public conversations. If they decided on their own together, that would be right for women. So yes, that's definitely one way to look at it, that given the circumstance, whatever little benefit that women can avail of the internet, whether through big tech or not, there is something to be said about the improvement in the current situation that can be brought through this partnership. And I think if there's anyone else who wants to add, someone who has a more firm stand on this. Otherwise, we can move forward.
There's someone.
Ben bir şey söylemek istiyorum. Kişisel olarak verilerimiz kullanılırken kişiye sorulmadığında burada bir hak problemi ortaya çıkmıyor mu? Yani araştırma açısından olumlu bir şeye gidebilir ama hak olarak bana kişisel verilerim kullanılıp kullanılmadığı sorulmadığında burada bir problem ortaya çıkıyor. Buna vurgu yapmak istiyorum. Etik değil.
Thank you. I'm waiting on the translation. Just a couple of seconds.
Okay, after you get the translation, Tika wants to speak in Spanish.
Sure.
Just a moment.
Okay, so the problem of ethics was shared, that when data is used, they're not asking us whether they can use it. So it might be good for research, but it's not ethical. So is this from the perspective of the organization or for Facebook? Correct. So I think the point here, as far as I understand, is that
Facebook.
Is Facebook. Okay, got it. So long as there is consent for the data that's being collected, it's okay. Right. So there was some echo, so I stopped.
Go ahead.
¿Puedo hablar?
Anyone. So the second response I just did.
No, yo lo que Lo que pienso es que el tema del consentimiento es muy complejo y hay líneas ahí un poco peligrosas. Nosotras que venimos ahí del feminismo sabemos que en la mayoría de las veces no tenemos condiciones de consentir, digamos así, que lo que llaman de consentimiento muchas veces es una forma de coerción. A mí me parece difícil decir que la organización no ha tomado la decisión buena. A mí me parece que no, pero el tema es que yo estoy aquí en Brasil, en nuestra organización aquí, lo que pienso es que al decir no a una cosa de esa, tenemos que tener una estrategia para tener alternativas, para lograr llegar al objetivo del trabajo desarrollado. Entonces, lo que yo pienso es que eso, decir no siempre viene con la demanda de tener un horizonte de construcción de alternativa. Pero seguramente, desde lo que hemos discutido aquí, Facebook, así como Microsoft, no está preocupado con la salud de las mujeres como estamos nosotras desde el movimiento, sino están preocupados en ampliar su poder y su capacidad de extracción de datos e incluso control de esos datos. Entonces, al hacer eso, muchas veces damos como los datos de las mujeres a la empresa. Entonces, bueno, para mí es muy evidente eso de que Facebook lo que está haciendo es ampliando su control, ampliando su proceso de extracción de datos. Eso.
Waiting for the translation again. I'm sorry this is inconvenient, but it's an interface problem with my application.
Sorry, Khala, I saw your message just now. Okay, so what she was trying to say was that we definitely say that this is a rights issue, but especially in feminism, we see that the consent part is very complicated and it is it's not easy to define it. Then second point that she made was that she works with women's rights organizations in Brazil. Another problem that this issue poses is when you are looking at these platforms and you are saying that you want to explore an alternative or you are looking for a solution. So if you say no, Facebook is not the solution that you're looking for, then what is the alternative that you're proposing? Because these are the services and these are the issues that need to be addressed.
Got it. So this is a very practical aspect to consider, that when Facebook is taking over and entering newer and newer domains and wiping out other alternatives and presenting better and cheaper options, then is it really practical to reject it on grounds of what may be feminist values or simply awareness of their business model? So it may not be practical to forego such a lucrative option. I think that is a very important point. Are there any other responses?
There, Nural wants to speak.
All right.
I will go ahead, Nural.
Merhaba. Ben şu çok yaygın olarak bilinen mesele üzerinden düşündüm açıkçası. Bir ürün ücretsizse orada ürünsüzsinizdir diye bir sözcük var. Belki bu hizmetin sağlanacak olması hukuki açıdan düşündüğümde insan ticaretine kadar varabilecek özel, kişisel, hassas verilerin sadece kadınların biyolojik, jinekolojik verileriyle ilgili değil, neydi belirsiz kişilerin eline geçmesini sağlayabilir. Dolayısıyla riskli ve olumsuz bir karar olduğunu düşünüyorum. Benim yanıtım hayır olurdu. Teşekkür ederim.
Okay, so she said that there is something, she brought out a very important point. She said there is something very well known that if something is free, then you are the product. She says that thinking from the law point of view, when this data is collected, this data can actually be even used for human trafficking, because this is gynecology information, health sensitive information about the bodies of women. So if this data is shared, then it can actually be extracted and used for other reasons, which is why she says my answer to the question would be no, Saheli should not go ahead with this partnership.
Correct. That is a very real concern, and I feel like all the responses have highlighted all the different aspects. We know that there are dire risks and dangers of sharing such sensitive data with a corporation that has no understanding or reason to be sensitive towards subject matter such as this. But despite that, given the world that we live in, what are the alternatives when big tech or companies like Facebook themselves are invested in wiping out alternatives and presenting themselves to be the most lucrative option? So practically, especially for an organization that is working on social issues where any progress or any development in women's conditions in access to information makes for a lot of it's a very high value impact. So given their constraints also, and given the constraints in the market, it may not be a practical decision to say no to it. Irrespective, I think the larger point is that what the individual decisions that we make are, in a sense, we may choose to reject Facebook, but that does not change the macro conditions of Facebook's power and how Facebook is altering the world that we live in. And this brings me to the other two questions, which is Facebook concerned about women's health? And what is Facebook even doing here? Facebook was developed by programmers and coders, and the primary function was to connect people for social networking. For them to then to jump into such a sensitive sector or area of women's health does not make sense. We do not see this happening in other professions or in other occupations, that an engineer would suddenly one day become an expert or start working on issues that have to do with women's health and women's rights. It's a very odd phenomenon. It's a very odd thing for Facebook to even want to go to areas that it has no expertise or knowledge in. We understand the dangers and risks associated with it, but what is the reason that Facebook is compelled to enter into newer and newer domains? And that's one of the things that I wanted to highlight over here. Moving on. Yeah. So one of the concepts or one of the processes that underlie data capitalism, which is the global economy that we know today, is data extractivism. And data extractivism is the answer to the question of why is Facebook concerned, or why is Facebook trying to enter an area which it has no expertise in, namely women's health. There are several other examples of this where big tech companies enter sectors, economic sectors, or social sectors, such as uh, the development sector of NGOs was the prior example. The reason why they do so is not because they're not invested in the cause, they're not interested in understanding and becoming one with that sector. What they're interested in and what propels them to enter newer frontiers is data extractivism. What is data extractivism? To that, extractivism as such is a concept that is very, very intrinsic to capitalist societies and capitalist economies. Even prior to data economies, extractivism was very core to the development of capitalism. In economic theory, data extractivism refers to economic form of organizing natural and social resources in which sustained profitability depends on the extraction over time of an increased amount of natural resources. Extractivism, therefore, is an economic problem internal to capitalism. And extractivism is embedded in the law of capitalist accumulation. How capitalism survives is by finding newer and newer ways of making profits, because it is a general, it's the crisis of capitalism that over time the rate of profit falls. And when you see rate of profit falling, you have to find a new way of regaining your profit maximizing mechanisms, because otherwise depressions happen, and it's a crisis of capitalism, and your economy goes through recession, and you go through I mean, the fundamental logic of capitalism breaks down when the rate of profit falls. And this is a cycle, that as rate of profit falls, then newer ways of profit making are conceptualized, and then so on and so forth. Social scientists and historians will also tell you that colonialism itself was a product of extractivism and capital accumulation. When markets saturate, you go and look for other markets to realize newer ways of making profit, whether it be by way of using cheaper labor elsewhere, or turning colonies into sprawling markets for the cheap products that are made that were made in industrial economies. So capitalist accumulation and extractivism are intrinsic to capitalism. And this applied convention historically has applied to natural resources and labor, and now it also applies to data. So just as profit making is a relentless impulse, data accumulation also becomes a relentless impulse. As a consequence of this, more and more wealth accumulates in fewer and fewer hands, because the same capitalists will enter newer markets, and there will be vertical integration in that the same capitalist is controlling many different functions and sectors in the economy. Another consequence of this will be the impact on labor. Capitalism sees falls in rate of profit cyclically, which means new frontiers of profit making have to be continually explored. So what are some of the new frontiers of profit making that capitalism, or data capitalism as we know now, that are entered by big tech companies? So Facebook, for instance, also tried to take on banking roles that are delivered by traditional banks. Even though Facebook will never try to say that I want to become a bank, it wants to take on banking functions. And the primary reason for that is to get more and more data. It's not so it can build brick and mortar physical banks and conduct banking functions like giving loans, but it wants to work alongside banks and take the shape and form of banks to be able to access the data. One way Facebook tried to do this was ask users to use Facebook to access bank desks, and to get in touch with bank representatives. If they would use data, their financial information would get captured, which they could then process and add value to and use for their same advertising marketing models. Another example is of Amazon entering sectors like women's small industries, especially those that are the mainstay for a lot of women entrepreneurs. Um, yeah, moving on. Another example of how these extractivist functions work is artificial intelligence, and how human labor is so central to artificial intelligence, and yet the aura that is built around high technology and artificial intelligence erases the human labor component of it. One of the one of the more straightforward ways of talking about it is platform labor and gig work, that you have these tech infrastructures or platforms which employ gig workers, and their labor is informalized and is precarious, there's underpaid, working conditions are poor. But as such, the concept of high technology and artificial itself depends on human labor in more direct ways. There's an example that I found very interesting from a paper that is written by Lily Irani. She says that in early 20th century America, the word computer referred to a highly skilled worker in scientific and engineering research, tasked with calculating complex ballistics tables and making vacuum tube computers do what scientists had specified mathematically. These computers were almost always women, taking orders from male scientists and engineers, and largely omitted from written histories of the modern computer. I found this interesting because it's one of the ways that women's labor is invisibilized outside of the domestic realm. When we talk about unremunerated care work or reproductive labor, the understanding is that it is the labor that women perform within the homes in reproducing the labor force and taking them, making sure they go back to work the next day. But there's women's labor outside of that sphere as well that has been historically invisibilized. And today, in the way that big tech functions, there are newer and newer mutations of the same. One other example of this is Amazon Mechanical Turk. Amazon Mechanical Turk is an Amazon owned website where anyone can post jobs, small, short jobs called micro work tasks, and people bid to do those tasks. And are paid very small amounts for paid very small amounts for doing those jobs. One example would be of image tagging. One of the things that we saw earlier is that how the database that is that is fed in then produces results on Google. So there are actual people sitting behind computers tagging a million pictures of cups as cup, and then and finally then Google learns what a mug cup looks like, and then when newer images of cups come in, it can automatically tag it as a cup. A task like this would be put on Amazon Mechanical Turk. Other examples include location tagging or transcribing long text. So menial, laborious, repetitive tasks that we think or assume that machines are able to do on their own, and which is why jobs will become redundant, ultimately rely on humans to do it. And Amazon Mechanical Turk is a platform where this happens on a much in a more visible but also at a much large scale. Some of the studies around Amazon Mechanical Turk highlight how AI, Amazon Mechanical Turk emerged to compensate for the shortcomings of artificial intelligence. And how it does so is not by openly conceding to the fact that artificial intelligence has fallen short. What it does, how it does, is by hiding the fact that AI has shortcomings. It creates a new frontier on which the software industry can invest in high growth startups, intelligent software, and low risk labor. So the programmers and software scientists still get to pretend that they are innovators doing creative work, and they are distanced from the actual manual labor that is put into feeding their computational intelligence, computational work that is done by globally dispersed populations, because anyone can log on to AMT and take on these tasks and get paid. We know from ILO studies and others that most of the people on Amazon Mechanical Turk are Indians, even though people who post jobs on Amazon Mechanical Turk are by design can by design not be Indian. So most of these employers on AMT, even though they don't have the status of employees, they're called requesters, are large companies based in the developed part of the world. But individuals can also post jobs. However, Amazon doesn't allow Indians to post any jobs. So while workers from the global south will act as workers on this platform, they can never act as employers. Here there is also an ideological and cultural work at play, where we have seen some narratives from India also, where people who think that simply because they're working on a laptop and they're working online, that is more respectable and dignified than, say, manual physical labor. However, we know that the situation of degradation and the situation of exploitation is much the same as, say, would be in a factory, and which is why we have coinages like digital sweatshops. So the ideological work is to kind of maintain the aura of technology, high technology, and artificial intelligence, while in the back end there are workers from certain parts of the world who are working and toiling hard to um, make sure that AI and technology work as smoothly as it claims to or wants to work, even though there are fundamental ruptures in the way that these things work. One second. One other thing I wanted to speak about here is there is this paper by Saskia Sassen where she very, I think, very sharply points out how data economy, for all its pretense of being rooted in data and digital and computer softwares, is at a fundamental level has very brutalist and brutal tendencies. So her study works to chip away at the dignity that is associated with data economy and lay bare the exploitation and degradation that is in fact very fundamental to it. Some of the examples that she uses is of very sophisticated cargo ships, large cargo ships which have a lot of like that use a lot of complex technologies, but when they go obsolete, they are dumped in parts of the developing world where manual labor is used to deconstruct and break down and dispose those cargo ships, which in fact has a lot of health consequences as well as environmental consequences. So these are kind of like the dirty details that are consciously hidden and kept away from this narrative of sophistication and dignified the dignity that AI and technology is supposed to accord to workers. Another example that she uses is of the subprime mortgage crisis, where a financial instrument was created, which was supposed to be linked to home loans, but the distance that was created through financialization between the actual home and the financial instrument was so vast that people were trading in the financial instrument. People who were trading in the financial instrument bore no risk, whereas people who actually bought the mortgages ended up losing their homes, while others trading in the financial market, uh, most of them ended up making profits. There were very few who did not make a profit in that process. And because these financial instruments were linked to physical homes, and these were subprime mortgages, which is to say they were loans given out to people who wouldn't normally make the cut due to creditworthiness and indicators around those. The people that this financial instrument and the subsequent crisis targeted were people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. And Saskia Sassen's study actually did an analysis of New York boroughs and how in boroughs of Bronx and Brooklyn, where more Black Americans reside, that's where most people lost their mortgages and suffered a loss. Whereas other uh, boroughs such as Manhattan, which are not, which don't have a very high population of Black Americans, they didn't lose out much in the crisis because those bad mortgages weren't sold to these to well-off people. And this is the kind of brutal tendency of these fancy and sophisticated instruments, whether produced through hyper financialization or through digitalization, that are often hidden. But Saskia Sassen warns us that these are very fundamental and core aspects that we should immediately be able to associate with these processes rather than assume them to be peripheral. Ankita, can we move on? Lastly, I wanted to share the example of Alibaba ET Agricultural Brain, or as I've titled it, What to Expect When Pigs Are Expecting. This was actually a news headline from one of the media outlets. Alibaba, as we know, is a Chinese e-commerce company which at present actually has presence across many different economic sectors, including online retail sales, financial services, credit rating services, electronic payment services, shopping search engine, and cloud computing. When Alibaba developed the agricultural brain, the functions that it provided was voice recognition, visual recognition, and also real-time environmental parameter monitoring. It was first introduced in pig farms, where this technology could predict much before than regular farmers could when the pigs were pregnant, and therefore they could track the health of the pigs sooner and in more efficient ways. Subsequently, of course, it went on to general other farming practices as well, and it collected a lot of minute, hyper local, and granular level of data of growth, health, daily activities, and other critical factors of crops as well as livestock. Uh, its multiple meters collect different data points, and the data points were fed into machine learning algorithms. These algorithms, in turn, provided critical insights to farmers. It recommends activities that can improve the health and yield, and soon enough, best practices for farming practices emerged for how to cut down costs, increase output, and minimize human errors. So this began with small farmers in China. Subsequently, when it had collected enough data, and very granular data at that, it Alibaba developed um, very precise precision technology, which it then sold to large corporations in parts of the developed world, namely New Zealand and Australia at first. And this data obviously was bought at high valuations by corporates, who then were able to cheaply produce farm products, which were then sold back to the developing world, which at lower prices, which then hurt the farmers of these parts of the world. So the implications of technology in uh, core economic sectors, but also other economic sectors, um, is that it re-entrenches and deepens global and regional inequality. Within agriculture itself, as in the case of Alibaba, corporate monopolization is a risk that we see happening actually in real time, when the same functionary or the same capitalist agent owns or is functioning in different spheres of agriculture, from, say, inputs to farming practices to selling, which is agricultural markets. They control the data from the production to the distribution end of the value chain, and are therefore able to manipulate behavior. And this is, in a way, what Ankita was talking about, data as a capital. When you're not only selling data, but you're controlling the production process and organizing the production process across your through your uh, power and control over data. Lastly, it also threatened the food sovereignty and autonomy of farmers, because they were producing for a particular corporation, and they were bound by contracts to do so. So even if they failed to produce for subsistence or for their own households, they had to produce the stipulated amount for the corporation, so which threatens their food sovereignty at a very fundamental level. Um, so, Ankita, would you like to take over?
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is actually the reason that we took time to sort of explain the different ways in which the system is working, starting from algorithms, artificial intelligence, and then building on data, and then looking at how there are ways in which we took Koala very nicely explained in very detail examples of systems that are working this way right now. And we talked about Alibaba, we talked about how Amazon is taking over a lot of sectors. We talked about Facebook taking over Saheli and all of that. I think we want to basically start saying that when we look at all of this as a system, sitting here discussing this during this workshop, when we're looking at this system, what are the questions that we need to ask is what we need to go back with. It is very important for us to understand that it is important for us to ask what are the systems that we want to be built. Do we want systems, the capitalist systems, to be recreated, to be rebuilt, to be entrenched, to be made more concrete through the sort of digital economy that we're operating in right now? What are the problems that need to be tackled in this digital economy and beyond this digital economy? What are the problems that we would want the digital to be focusing on? Because right now the problems that the digital is focusing on is more profit, more data. So what sort of problems do we want the digital economy to be solving for us? And then another question for that, which is a very important question and which we might want to discuss in another workshop sometime: who is best placed to build them? Who is best placed to look at this data? Who is best placed to own this data? Who is best placed to say what systems need to be built? Who owns what sort of data is produced? And who owns the decision making in that data process? So the accountability of this system, accessibility to the population, all of that is something that a question it feeds into the questions that we need to be asking as feminists, as people who are working in the social change sector, as people who need to develop a paradigm that at least tries to build an opposition or resistance to the system that we are all facing today. Because the system is growing exponentially. And for us to build on it, it is important for us to be asking the right questions very, very soon. So summing up, we wanted everyone to go back with this image in their mind, where the data is acting as a power source to the rate, to the resources, to the monitoring, to analyzing, and that's feeding the algorithms that are also at the same time. If you see, the algorithms are connected here. The algorithms are feeding into what we see as reward. The algorithms are feeding into what we see as what we want. So when we say that the algorithms are showing us advertisements, and I talked about that example of walking into a bookstore, the idea here is you're not controlling what book you're choosing. It is someone else who's feeding in your head what is it that is important for you, what is it that you require to do, and what is it that you need to spend your time on. When I look at my phone and a lot of apps are giving me a lot of notifications, all of those notifications are not the notification that I asked for. When I search on Google and I type certain words, the results that I get, those are not the results that I asked for. When I look at the advertisements, those are not the advertisements that I asked for. The system is assuming those things on my behalf. Those decisions are being taken on my behalf. So when you call it the right framework, or when you call it consent, there is also this whole idea of even the building of that consent is happening in a very different and in a very structured manner right now. What is it that I would like to spend my time on is also something which is being constructed outside of my head. And how do I see all of that as a system which is operating? And this is a very, very basic diagram that I think we can all go back with. And summarizing, these were the things overall, because I think we discussed a lot of concepts. We talked about how algorithms are biased. We talked about how data is an organizing principle, which moved from being something which was valuable to being something which is creating value now. And then we also talked about data extractivism through different examples. And we would like to conclude with talking about where would we want to go from here. As feminists, as a collective that is trying to create that sort of resistance against discriminatory practices, against TNCs, against big tech, against all of those who are perpetuating this sort of inequality in our system, we would like to inculcate a critical view of technology in our daily lives. Every day that you see technology and you feel, oh, technology is helping me, technology is making my life easier, technology is making my life simpler, there has to be a critical angle to it. And I really liked as someone, when Kuala was presenting the case story, someone asked that question. The idea is that it might be easier for me to say this today. It might be an option that I avail to be able to access certain things. But at the end of the day, how much of it is helping me? This is sensitive information, and why should I be sharing it? And finally, it is very, very important for us as activists to inform our activism with what we know about the internal workings of the data capitalism, to keep that in mind. When we have created such a strong narrative of a system, of a paradigm that has tried to oppose the capitalist discriminatory practices, this system is no different. In fact, this system is bigger and more dangerous than the system that we were opposing before this. And we need to open our eyes to that. And we are ending with small suggestions on what can we do after the workshop. Something as simple as, let's switch to open source platforms like Big Blue Button instead of using Zoom. We can also use to end-to-end encrypted chat applications. There is a link over there that we can all use. I will also post that link in the chat box. We can choose what to do on the internet. The next time when YouTube is suggesting a video to you, please don't watch that video. Choose what video you want to watch. Do not let YouTube control what videos you're watching, and feed more data. And it's basically positive reinforcements, right? When we say, yes, YouTube, you were right, so I'm going to watch this video because it's very interesting for me. So let's watch our own videos. Let's select the videos that we watch. And very, very important is, right now we see a lot of political polarization happening because of fake news. And obviously that's another thing that digital platforms are doing. They're providing a very fast network for fake news to travel to everyone. And it's so penetrative that it's absolutely invisible to our eyes, but that happens in no time. So while we do so much Google search and feed so much data to our systems, that extra Google search is very, very important. Do that little extra Google search before sharing. Do that little extra Google search before communicating or interacting with an interface or an artificial intelligence platform. And then finally, be on a lifelong quest to learn ways to subvert big tech, which I think we are doing together. And we've also talked about more sessions to this workshop. So yes, we, I think, are already on the right path with that. Yeah, so with that, that is what we wanted to discuss. These are the things that we had in mind for the workshop, because we were told that this has to be like an elementary introduction of the concepts. But we are open to questions, we are open to conversations, discussions, we are open to, if you want any sources, more sources on the things that we presented, if you want papers to read on data as a capital or data as bodies, we can share those with you. So yes, now the floor is open to everybody to have a conversation around all of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankita and Kuala, for the very good workshop and for finishing with a few takeaway points and the concrete stuff that we can do already, start doing to question the presence of technology in our daily lives. I know we are a little bit tired, so I propose that we stretch a little bit. Everyone raise their arms, shake a little bit, move a little bit, just so we can have some energy to make a quick round of questions. Are we stretching? Are we moving? Are we remembering that we have a body? Yes, I would ask some the Turkish sisters to put some Turkish music so we can dance a little bit. But let's just make a. I assume we have questions. We have things we want to say. So if those who want to start can raise their hands, and we will open the floor for their discussion. Yes, Gönül, go
Durum
ahead.
şu, dijital terhaneler kavramını azıcık açabilir mi Kavla?
I'm sorry, again,
Khala,
translation
she's
is.
asking you to explain digital sweatshops in detail.
Okay, sure. So, the idea of sweatshop is, I mean, the association with sweatshop is that of drudgery, exploitation, poor working conditions, low wages, no social protection, right? And typically we think of factories or manufacturing units where workers work under these conditions and they are located in developing countries, and under these conditions workers work. But digital sweatshops would then mean similar working conditions, but not in a physical factory or physical manufacturing units, but on the realm of the online. So the example that I gave of Amazon Mechanical Turk, where like I said, more than 50% of the online workforce on Amazon Mechanical Turk is from India. Even though the employers who post these tasks on Amazon Mechanical Turk are large corporations, or even if they are individuals, there's very few. I mean, of course, US is the primary country, but very few other countries, which are also largely developed nations, that can post jobs. But the workers primarily come from a developing country. Which is India. And the working conditions of these workers are very similar to the traditional sweatshops that we know of, which is that the pay is very low. There is no income or job security. There are no social protections. What else? There's newer forms of exploitation, in fact. So just to give an example, if someone from the US has posted a job that I need 100 people to go through these say 500 photos and identify which of them are pornographic in content. So 100 people will go through that much content, and I mean, will go through that much pornographic content, in fact, which has its own psychological implications as well. um, but the employer can then reject the work that you have done. I will see that, okay, maybe this person, and I know, and I need not offer an explanation for why I'm rejecting the work that you have done for me. And even though the person may have spent a lot of time doing the work and has gone through some kind of psychological bearings of the task, the work can be rejected without any explanation. And so that is the kind of control that employers have, and workers have no way of filing complaints or even communicating with the requester saying that this is my grievance, how to address this. So these are some of the newer forms of exploitation. Another one being that if I sign up on Amazon Mechanical Turk, and the time that I spend looking for tasks that I'm able to do, because there might be language or cultural barriers and I may not be able to do all the tasks that are posted. The time that I spend looking for tasks, of course, is not remunerated. So even though I'm spending a lot of time online, I'm not paid for all of that time. And in fact, even when I do tasks, my work might get rejected. So these are some additional exploitative conditions that mark digital sweatshops over and above the other conditions that we know of. That there is no direct employee-employer relationship here. There's nobody who I can demand rights from. I can't. There's very little scope for organizing and unionizing and making demands as the workforce. So yeah, I mean, Amazon Mechanical Turk is in fact, and in the context of Amazon Mechanical Turk, the term digital sweatshops is often used.
Thank you, Kuala.
Yeah.
Are there other questions, other comments? Well, I have something. It's more a comment than a question, but I think that the workshop has showed very well how urgent, as the questions that you were asking on the end, right? How urgent it is that we start debating that, and that we start debating alternative infrastructures and alternative systems and alternative ways to organize the digital. And that poses also a very concrete challenge for feminist organizations, right? We need perhaps to start mapping and to start appropriating this debate and building alliances with groups of people, with movements that are already advancing these types of stuff, but perhaps lacking a feminist approach. Because this can also be a challenging, right? It's not given that, I don't know, free software or I don't know, grassroots technology initiatives will have a feminist perspective. So I think this is a powerful mix that we need to actively promote in a context where our daily lives and our interactions are increasingly mediated by digital technologies. And in that sense, the centrality of fighting corporations, of fighting transnational corporations and their control of the system becomes very, very key. So we would probably need also to go a little more deepen into how to do that, right? And hopefully we will have the time to do so in the, for instance, in the next session, or also to deepen more the debate in future workshops. Zainab said that everyone needs time to digest the info. Can I interpret that as a call for a pause? A 10 minutes break?
It's possible.
Okay, so I propose we make a 10 minutes break and then we come back at 16:10, right? No, 6:10. 6 hours 10, right? In Turkish time.
We are 10 past 6 here.
Yes. Okay. So that we can perhaps if there are questions, we come back to them. If not, we come back to the next panel. So 10 minutes break.
And for stretching, we will be recording music. Would
Good.
you like to? Okay.
Stretching like this.
Yeah, we will do so.
Zeynep şimdi güzel bir müzik açacak. Give us fascinating song, Zeynep.
Oi, Chica. Me oyes? Chica? Você quer testar?
Bantsista istiyorum. İsyan.
We are just going to test with Chica if the audio is working, so for the presentation. Ah, ok, peraí. Você quer que eu libere em qual? Nesse Chica MMM Brasil? Liberei. Chica? Não, peraí, peraí. Fala.
Oi, tá me ouvindo?
Tô ouvindo.
Então,
No espanhol.
Vou falar espanhol, então.
Não, pode falar português.
Tá.
Tô no canal
É o
espanhol.
seguinte, porque eu tenho o mesmo problema da companheira que estava na apresentação, porque eu uso o Ubuntu. Então, eu tô aqui no computador, eu queria ver se eu conseguia falar daqui em espanhol e a pessoa e a intérprete traduzir para o inglês e para o turco e não fazer daquele outro jeito que eu estou fazendo usando o telefone, que é esse Tica 2 espanhol. Mas aí se não der, tudo bem. É porque eu estou no computador porque é melhor para eu conseguir ver a cara de todo mundo, né? E a apresentação, porque no celular é impossível.
Mas aí como é que você queria fazer, então? Você liberaria o áudio dos dois?
Mariana?
Não, então, eu queria ver se podia ser só por esse, mas acho que não, né? Então eu libero o áudio só do outro.
Você está falando, eu estou te ouvindo no espanhol.
Você está me ouvindo no
Would you
espanhol?
like the songs?
Peraí, rapidinho. Sorry, Zeynep. We are solving a technical problem because Tika will present soon, and she's with problems with her channel. Do you hear me, Zeynep?
Eu te ouço, Maricota.
Mas Zeynep não tá ouvindo. Zeynep, do you hear me?
Yes. Would you like to hear the songs I said?
Yes, just a second, because I am. Tika has a problem with her audio, and she will present, so we are trying to solve.
Ok.
Então, Maricota, se você. Zeynep is not hearing me, né?
Não.
Não, então eu posso falar daqui em espanhol. É isso?
Fica falando aí que eu vou entrar no canal normal para ver se eu te ouço. Peraí, vai falando.
Vou falar aqui normalmente e tal.
Eu tô te ouvindo mesmo no canal de interpretação, no canal desativado.
Tá, beleza. Então, o que eu faço? Falo daqui, então.
Você fala daí mesmo?
Tá, mas daí a pessoa que está interpretando por inglês consegue me ouvir e interpretar.
Eu acho que sim. O que a gente pode fazer é, assim que voltar a pausa, eu te peço para você falar alguma coisa e ver se as intérpretes estão ouvindo.
Tá bom.
Porque eu acho que elas também devem estar em pausa. Eu não tenho como perguntar isso para elas agora.
Não, beleza. Formou.
Pode ser? Eu acho que vai dar certo. Porque se a menina conseguiu falar, ela conseguiu falar, então você também vai conseguir. O que talvez você não consiga é ouvir interpretar as perguntas, mas aí eu posso.
Mas aí eu ouço aqui no celular.
Tá. Então tá bom.
Porque não dá o eco.
Isso, perfeito. Tá.
Formou. Valeu, beijo.
Beijo. Zeynep, music, it's okay. We finished technical.
Zeynep is not here.
Buradayım.
Oh, yes. Müzik açıyor musun?
Açmadım çünkü bir teknik sorunları vardı.
Tamam,
Onu
bitti dedi ama.
onu duymadım.
Sana gelmedi ses o zaman.
Yani o zaman off'tan açıyorum sanırım, değil mi? Yani bir dil seçmeden.
Evet.
O zaman.
Bam, boom. Marca. Yeah. 1, 2.
Mesečina otkrila, gde je tamo pokrila pesmu, igru, muziku, što sviramo u zoru. Neka svako zna šta je pesma ta, kad se noge umore, da pevamo do zore. Opa, cupa, neka svako srce lupa, da saborne haljine usvijatije. Opa, cupa, i da moje srce lupa, već saborne haljine naše apije. Lumaj, lumaj, lumaj, ajde, ajde, ajde, od Ebra do Dunava, ajde, ajde, ajde. Lumaj, lumaj, lumaj, ajde, ajde, ajde, od Ebra do Dunava, ajde, ajde, Sada svako zna šta je pesma ta, kad se noge umore, da pevamo do zore. Opa, cupa, neka svako srce lupa, nek saborne haljine sve apije. Opa, cupa, i da moje srce lupa, nek saborne haljine naše apije. Umaj, umaj, umaj, ajde, ajde, ajde, od Ebra do Dunava, ajde, ajde, ajde. Umaj, umaj, umaj, ajde, ajde, ajde, od Ebra do Dunava, ajde, ajde, ajde. El ejército del Ebro, rumba la rumba la rumbaera. El ejército del Ebro, rumba la rumba la rumbaera. Una noche el río pasó, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Una noche el río pasó, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Y a las tropas invasoras, rumba la rumbaera. Y a las tropas invasoras, rumba la rumbaera. Buena paliza les dio, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Buena paliza les dio, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Pero nada pueden las bombas, rumba la rumbaera. Pero nada pueden las bombas, rumba la rumbaera. Donde sobra corazón, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Donde sobra corazón, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. ¡Ay de! Era igual que combatimos, rumba, rumba, rumba, rumba, la rumbera. Era igual que combatimos, rumba, rumba, rumba, rumba, la rumbera. Rumba, rumba, deberemos combatir, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Deberemos combatir, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Deberemos combatir, ay Carmela, ay Carmela. Deberemos combatir, ay Carmela, ay Carmela.
Okay. Are we back?
Yes.
Should we... wait a second. Yeah, now I can see you. Okay.
Şarkı bitti.
So now we are going to start... Now we are going to start the section about digitalization and feminist activism. We will have 20 minutes presentation about activism and communication by Tica Moreno from World March of Women Brazil. Then we will have Zeynep and Damla talk on digital activism. I think they will talk about the experience in Turkey. We will have a podcast and then a talk about, a podcast. Yeah, of course. So I now want just to check if the interpreters can hear Chica when she speaks in Spanish and if you are able to translate. Can we just make a quick test, please? So Chica, can you say something? I will unmute you. Yeah, sorry. Peraí. Pronto.
Hola, ¿me escuchan? ¿Me escuchan si hablo por acá? Sí, entonces funciona bien. Funciona bien.
Turkish sisters, can you hear?
Yes,
The
we are
translation?
hearing. Yeah, we hear translation from English channel, but also the sound, original sound.
Yeah, so you would have now to cut the original audio. Can we try again if we cut original audio?
Sigo hablando aquí alguna cosa para que puedan ver si logren escuchar la interpretación y no mi voz en español. ¿No?
No, porque porque estamos escuchando tu audio original en todos los canales.
Entonces voy por el teléfono.
Y ahora yo no te escucho en el español. ¿Va a ser en el móvil? Tá. Vamos cambiar, entonces, um momentito. Eu vou silenciar esse, então vou abrir o outro. Sorry, we are just solving this technical...
Ahora está bien. Ahora logran escucharme en los canales, tranquilo.
Repete.
Turkish channel is
Estoy
okay.
aquí hablando
We're
desde el teléfono en el canal de español.
Perfeito, pode ir.
Está bien, entonces.
Evet, duyuyoruz.
Mariana, te pido para controlar así mi tiempo. Yo estoy aquí me autocontrolando, pero son muchas cosas a la vez. Yo quería decir que, estoy aquí muy contenta de esos 2 días de taller con ustedes. Entonces, gracias por invitarnos y gracias también por toda la logística para garantizar la traducción, la interpretación que es tan importante en nuestra construcción de movimiento. Es muy bueno para mí también ver que hay compañeras con la misma camiseta aquí, así que me siento muy identificada y muy bien aquí en ese espacio. Yo voy a compartir la experiencia de la Marcha Mundial de las Mujeres de Brasil. Aquí también está Elena, que es una compañera acá de Brasil, entonces ahí sí, ella puede incluso, si hay ahí en el debate o también por aquí, puede aportar en ese compartir de experiencias. Bueno, nosotros acá, nuestra estrategia en todo ese proceso de construir movimiento feminista enfrentando el capitalismo digitalizado, nuestra estrategia es partir de nuestro acumulado como movimiento en términos de cómo mirar esa situación que vivimos, cómo analizarla, actuando para transformarla. Entonces, eso significa algunas cosas cuando pensamos en términos de nuestra construcción de un feminismo popular, como es la Marcha Mundial de las Mujeres, y ahí entonces también nuestros principios que se actualizan y que se ponen en práctica en ese proceso de enfrentamiento al capitalismo digitalizado. Quería compartir algunas cosas sobre esos principios. Primero es que si hablamos desde el punto de vista de la construcción de un movimiento popular, es muy importante tener en cuenta, tener en mente los tiempos de los procesos de construcción. Los tiempos que llevan para que el conjunto de las mujeres estén juntas en ese proceso de enfrentamiento, las diferentes comprensiones de lo que pasa desde el lugar que cada una vive. Decimos en la marcha, así como los zapatistas, que vamos siempre en el ritmo de lo más lento, porque así juntas es que llegamos más lejos, no tan necesariamente rápido, pero sí más lejos, juntas. Entonces, por veces toda esa discusión sobre digitalización se presenta como una película de ficción científica, una distopía, pero que la vivimos ahora, ¿no? En nuestra vida actual. Y hemos visto que así en los procesos de organización, presentar esa situación y ese debate en términos de terror como el método, como esa cosa de que no hay alternativa, no funciona muy bien para construir justamente las prácticas y posibilidades de transformación. O sea, nosotras ahí también tenemos ese principio de entender, denunciar, pero también anunciar que es posible transformar esa situación. Es lo que mueve la resistencia de nuestros pueblos desde antes de la digitalización del capitalismo, ¿no? Entonces, ahí es una fortaleza nuestra. Entonces, tenemos que partir de cómo las mujeres en cada lugar están viviendo esos temas en sus vidas, cómo están usando las tecnologías, cómo están sintiendo eso, y mucho ya fue hablado sobre eso aquí esos 2 días. Y desde ahí ir construyendo el debate político y las alternativas desde la práctica colectiva. Un otro principio importante es el tema de las alianzas. Mariana habló eso en el final de la otra sesión y creo que aquí vamos a lograr compartir un poquito también sobre eso. Nosotras somos un movimiento cuya estrategia es el fortalecimiento de nuestra autoorganización como mujeres, pero también que construimos nuestras luchas en alianza entre movimientos sociales, con la vía campesina, con todo el proceso de lucha antiimperialista, por la soberanía alimentaria, etc. Y entonces ese principio de las alianzas también es fundamental para nuestro accionar en estos tiempos. Y desde ahí pensando que hay que ampliar las alianzas hacia los colectivos que actúan y construyen los software libres, las alternativas tecnológicas que dan ahí también una disputa antisistémica y que actúan en la tecnología desde una perspectiva transformadora. El otro principio es que nuestra análisis siempre es integrada a la acción. No solo el análisis para comprender, sino también desde la acción que vamos aprendiendo no solo aprendiendo a hacer las cosas, pero también desde la acción vamos comprendiendo cómo el mundo funciona y cómo enfrentarlos. Nosotros de la marcha comprendemos ese momento de avance del capitalismo sobre nuestros cuerpos, trabajos, territorios, con el uso de la violencia y la militarización. Y desde ahí es que vamos buscando comprender ese proceso de digitalización y enfrentarlo. Entonces, ¿cómo se actualizan los procesos de mercantilización, intervención y control sobre los cuerpos de las mujeres con la digitalización? ¿Cómo se dan esos procesos de artificialización de nuestros cuerpos, de control por medio de la extracción de datos y las aplicaciones. Ahí se suman, sabemos, las corporaciones de tecnología digital, pero también las corporaciones farmacéuticas. Eso y todo el complejo biomédico, eso es muy importante. Entonces, también sobre los territorios, cómo se actualizan y se transforman los procesos de acaparamiento de los territorios, tanto si pensamos la base material de lo digital, todo el tema de la extracción mineral, pero también entrando en todo ese tema de agricultura 4.0. También el tema de cómo se actualizan las herramientas, instrumentos de la militarización, la vigilancia racista y todo eso que las compañeras ya aportaron también. Y ahí por fin en el tema del trabajo, que ahí yo creo que es un aspecto fundamental, ¿no? Porque pensamos siempre el trabajo, y ayer eso estuvo muy fuerte en nuestro debate, el trabajo comprendido como todo lo que hacemos para sostener la vida. Y aquí es donde está una potencia fundamental de nuestro análisis feminista anticapitalista, porque en la presentación de la sesión ahora anterior quedó muy evidente, muy buena incluso la presentación, los felicito, todo eso de qué son los datos y que hay un proceso de extracción de los datos. Y el tema es ese, que los datos no existen en abstracto. Los datos, ellos existen a partir de nuestra vida cotidiana, a partir de nuestra vida en relación. Y para que la vida exista, necesitamos los eslabones que la sostienen. Entonces, ahí está la naturaleza, la alimentación, el cuidado. Entonces, los procesos que sostienen la vida y que están bajo ataque son fundamentales para ese momento del capitalismo, como siempre han sido. Entonces, un poco esa mirada que no somos las mujeres, nuevamente solo impactadas negativamente por ese sistema, sino que la opresión sobre las mujeres está ahí en el corazón. Entonces, la explotación del trabajo y todo eso está en el corazón de lo que ese sistema necesita necesariamente para mantenerse. Bueno, y ahora paso un poco a cómo manejamos eso en la práctica, en nuestra construcción, cómo aterrizamos todo eso. Y ahí partimos también de nuestro acumulado político, que aquí en Brasil tiene un punto fundamental en el colectivo de comunicadoras de la Marcha Mundial de las Mujeres, que estamos construyendo desde 2013, sí, cuando hubo el encuentro internacional de la marcha aquí en Brasil. Y ahí hemos acumulado una comprensión política de la comunicación y que sirve mucho para manejar toda esa cuestión de digitalización y Internet también, porque pensamos y practicamos la comunicación no como algo de especialistas, no simplemente como un instrumento para la política, sino como una estrategia integrada en nuestra construcción que tiene que ver con nuestros métodos de construcción, con nuestras opciones políticas de cómo hacerlo, y eso significa también las opciones políticas de qué herramientas utilizar, ¿no? Nosotras acá en Brasil, actualmente, en esas semanas, esos meses, estamos llevando a cabo un proceso colectivo de debate sobre justamente esos temas, y que hay diferentes partes. Una primera parte que es sobre toda esa discusión sobre Internet, comunicación y construcción de movimiento, y otra parte más vinculada a la cuestión de las tecnologías digitales y el poder corporativo, el poder de las transnacionales. Y ahí hay dos claves en el debate: el tema de la educación y las transformaciones que significan las instituciones públicas tener un 70% de sus procesos y conocimientos de saberes almacenados ahí utilizando herramientas de Google y Microsoft, y también el tema de agricultura 4.0. Pero el tema es aquí que voy a enfocar aquí tiene que ver con la primera, que es Internet, comunicación y construcción de movimiento, que es el tema que ustedes solicitaron, ¿sí? En eso nosotras estamos partiendo de comprender cómo las mujeres de la marcha y de nuestras comunidades están usando la Internet. Hemos visto desde muchos relatos e intervenciones de las compañeras, hemos visto esa situación que muchas veces la Internet es reducida al WhatsApp, que es de Facebook, por tema de las conexiones, ¿no? De las dificultades de conexión, los límites de conexión, y de ahí también considerando las desigualdades regionales aquí en Brasil. Brasil es un país muy, muy grande, hay mucha conexión, por ejemplo, en el sudeste, bajísima infraestructura de conexión en el norte, por ejemplo, hay muchas desigualdades rurales y hay muchas desigualdades también si consideramos el tema de ingreso. También las desigualdades entre hombres y mujeres en lo que se refiere al uso de la Internet, que cada uno hace en Internet. El otro punto muy fuerte en nuestra discusión tiene que ver con todo eso de la sobrecarga de trabajo y qué ha significado durante la pandemia esa sobrecarga en el momento de aislamiento, pero también el hecho de que en Brasil, durante la pandemia, y ahí los procesos, hay siempre que considerar los procesos del poder político y la extrema derecha, el gobierno de Jair Bolsonaro, que ha impulsado formas de acceder a políticas públicas, de relacionarse con el Estado en el marco del desmantelamiento de los sistemas que había antes, por medio de aplicaciones. Entonces, un ejemplo. Durante la pandemia, para que las mujeres la población pudiera accesar el auxilio de ingreso emergencial, era necesario cadastrarse en una aplicación. Y eso ha sido como toda una cuestión, porque los teléfonos no tenían espacio para hacer, no tenían la conexión para hacer. Entonces, las mujeres en cada lugar fueron construyendo estrategias para, en solidaridad, lograr garantizar el cadastro para acceder a ese auxilio de ingreso entre todas. Hay ahí otra cuestión muy fuerte, que es todo el problema de las fake news. Entonces, muy fuerte esa relación con la política, con la extrema derecha y con los procesos de desinformación que se dan por los grupos de WhatsApp, y el hecho de que la gente solo puede acceder a WhatsApp y su paquete, sus datos, su conexión no permite acceder a enlaces para verificar si son verdaderos o no, como el origen de la noticia, es una cuestión muy, muy fuerte aquí en Brasil. Y hay una preocupación también con una mirada que hegemoniza esa perspectiva que todo es virtual, y no es así si pensamos en la diversidad de nuestra construcción de movimiento. Entonces, hemos llevado a cabo mapeos y estamos llevando a cabo mapeos sobre cómo las mujeres del movimiento se comunican, cómo acceden a información, cómo se sienten en ese proceso, especialmente mujeres rurales, para pensar también cómo armar nuestras acciones de comunicación y movilización. Estamos viendo también formas creativas de usar la Internet a partir de ahí, utilizando lo que las mujeres están accediendo. Entonces, hemos realizado procesos interesantísimos de formación basados en audio no solo como audios preparados, digamos, con contenidos preparados así para repasar, sino desde las propias mujeres, sobre cómo están viendo, sintiendo temas como el trabajo doméstico durante la pandemia, el tema de la educación y todo eso. Entonces, las formas creativas de hacer formación por el medio de la Internet, formación feminista para la organización del movimiento, parten de la comprensión de cuáles son las capacidades de acceso, las dificultades, y busca garantizar el diálogo directo entre las militantes en el momento de ayuntamiento más grande. Incluso por el WhatsApp.
Espera aí, rapidinho.
We are having Turkish interpretation in Spanish channel. Ay.
Estoy escuchando un poquito. ¿Puedo seguir?
Puede.
Yo estaba hablando
5
de la
minutos.
formación. Entonces, para eso la formación por audio estamos utilizando el WhatsApp, sabiendo de los límites y problemas por ser corporativo del Facebook y tal, pero uniendo también la comunicación virtual a las formas analógicas de crear y poner nuestro feminismo en práctica. Entonces, el uso de sonido en bicis, en comunidades para hacer llegar las informaciones de las actividades, de las acciones de solidaridad, etcétera. Y también siempre ese proceso de lenguaje simple, accesible, comprometida con el feminismo popular, plural, colectivo. Decimos siempre que hacemos feminismo y comunicación en las calles, en las redes y en el campo, que es rosado en portugués, no sé cómo decir. Pero eso me parece importante porque está ese tema de la convergencia de distintas formas de comunicación para lograr hacer la comunicación y la organización de nuestro movimiento. Entonces, no es solo poner contenido allí y distribuir por las redes sociales, es sí hacer un proceso vinculado con la organización del movimiento. Yo quería,
10 minutos.
Mariana, que pudiera compartir los 3 imagenecitos para esos últimos puntos que quería mostrar, porque en ese proceso también hemos construido junto con la marcha aquí de Brasil, pero en el proceso de la marcha mundial en ámbito internacional, hemos construido unos videos de animación, si Mariana puede poner ahí, donde logramos poner ahí la discusión de cómo funciona la digitalización del capital en el marco de cómo funciona el poder corporativo. Y entonces no fue solo sobre la digitalización, logramos hacerlo digitalización, agronegocio, control de territorios y también todas las estructuras de precarización de trabajo. Y ahí dan una mirada más general de cómo es justamente ese proceso del poder corporativo ampliándose sobre nuestras vidas. Ahí están los 3 y creo que Elena va a poner aquí en el chat también para que puedan acceder después en el YouTube. Pero en un esfuerzo de lograr hacerlo en un lenguaje simple que dialogue más con la gente, ¿no? Entonces, esa perspectiva de la educación popular. Otro tema tiene que ver con el tema de la seguridad digital, en ese contexto que vivimos de criminalización y ataques misóginos de derecha, y fortalecemos esa comprensión de que no se trata de un comportamiento individual, como si yo voy a usar Signal o criptografía, y sí de que la seguridad digital nuestra sea una preocupación colectiva, o sea, que estemos conscientes de cuáles son las informaciones sensibles de nuestro movimiento, de que tenemos responsabilidad con nuestra seguridad personal y del colectivo. Y ahí nuevamente llegamos en el uso de herramientas. Nosotras tenemos una alianza que ya hemos venido construyendo hace unos 5 años con una colectiva de mujeres que son feministas y están ahí en el mundo de la tecnología, dando la disputa, dando la batalla. Y por ahí hemos logrado avanzar en poder usar tecnologías que no son propietarias, o sea, eso que la compañera Ankita ha planteado de Big Blue Button. Nosotros estamos utilizando la Ángela. ¿Se puede pasar, Maricota? Lo que llamamos de Angela es un homenaje a Angela Davis y es justamente ¿cómo se dice? La instalación de Big Blue Button en la servidora de esa colectiva activista feminista. Entonces, con esa herramienta, no sé si puede pasar ahí, Mariana, para que ellos puedan ver la interfaz. Interfaz, no sé si se llama así. Con esa herramienta de Angela hemos logrado hacer nuestras actividades sin utilizar el Zoom, por ejemplo, o las tecnologías propietarias. Y lo importante de eso no es solo usar la alternativa, usar la Ángela. Yo no estoy viendo aquí, pero espero que ustedes puedan estar viendo. Pero sí también que mientras utilizamos esa herramienta, que es Big Blue Button y Ángela, en una servidora que sabemos dónde es, que sabemos de quiénes es, que sabemos quiénes usan, ahí podemos tener también un proceso de concientización sobre la infraestructura material del digital. Entonces, por ejemplo, nosotros sabemos que podemos utilizar libremente si es 30 personas utilizando 5 cámaras, porque hay una capacidad para el conjunto de los colectivos y movimientos que utilizan la servidora.
Fica só um momento para ver se está todo mundo vendo, porque deu problema aqui. Desculpa. Was everyone being able to see the screen? Ildis, were you being able to see the PowerPoint that I was showing?
No.
You were not being able to see?
No.
I will try again. Can you check, please? Because I thought it was showing. Okay, I need to. Can you see now?
Sí, esa es Ángela.
Yeah.
Okay. So, Tika, go
Gracias,
ahead.
Mariana.
Sorry.
Esta es un poco la interfase de Ángela para que puedan verla. Así es una homenaje a Angela Davis. Ángela, entonces, para que quede claro, es como el apodo, el nombre que se dio a Big Blue Button instalado en la servidora esa segura activista. Y lo que yo quería decir es eso, que al ser como una herramienta instalada en una servidora de un colectivo activista, tenemos ahí la posibilidad de comprender los límites y las posibilidades de la infraestructura material digital, en ese caso, la servidora. Entonces, los acuerdos que son importantes de hacer entre todos los colectivos y movimientos que utilizan esa plataforma de manera compartida y segura para garantizar la seguridad de todos. Y ahí, por fin, yo quería pasar a la próxima imagen, Mariana, que tiene que ver con un otro proceso que hemos construido en términos de alternativa, también con esas compañeras de esa colectiva, con quien hemos trabajado ya hace unos 5 años, que empezamos haciendo talleres para compartir qué hay de común entre los procesos de criptografía y la agroecología en términos de disputa tecnológica. Y ahí un resultado de eso está siendo un proceso súper interesante de construcción de una red de comunicación comunitaria inalámbrica en una comunidad rural en la que actuamos, una comunidad quilombola en la que actuamos también como socio, la organización que hacemos parte, en Vale do Ribeira. Entonces ahí está todo el proceso de construcción, instalación de la red, que implica talleres para reflexionar sobre por qué, para la comunicación hoy, todo eso, aquí para tener la comprensión de cuáles son los instrumentos hasta el tema de la instalación de las antenas. Entonces, todo eso para decir nuevamente que para nosotros es súper importante ese tema de poner la disputa y de no permitir un nuevo TINA, There's No Alternative 4.0. No podemos caer en ese discurso porque estamos ahí en la resistencia, estamos ahí construyendo fuerzas en todas las arenas de la vida, con nuestras formas, nuestras alternativas, que necesariamente son colectivas, son populares, no pueden ser corporativas, porque para nosotros es muy evidente los objetivos de las transnacionales, no solo las de tecnología de información y comunicación, sino de las transnacionales, pensando como poder corporativo. Entonces, tienen que ser alternativas y prácticas populares soberanas. Y entonces por ahí nosotras vamos, resistimos para vivir, marchamos para transformar. Es un poquito eso que quería compartir. Y gracias, Mariana.
Thank you, Chica, for your input. I will directly pass the floor to Zeynep and Damla. Please go ahead.
Biz şöyle düşündük, paslaşarak konuşacağız. Genel bir durum değerlendirmesi yapacağız. Hani Türkiye'de dijital aktivizm deyince hani biz neler yaşadık, neler yapıyoruz meselesi üzerine konuşacağız. Ondan sonrasında da podcast üzerine konuşacağız ve birlikte de bir podcast yapmayı deneyeceğiz. Şimdi ama öncelikle bir soru sormak istiyorum Tika'ya. Çünkü bizim de bütün yaptıklarımızı aslında burada korona çok etkiledi. Sanki korona öncesi bir dönemmiş gibi çok yüz yüze bir şey anlattın. Bu korona nasıl etkiledi sizi onu ben merak ettim. Bağ yapmak için. Araya da kaynasın istemedim. Onu sormak istiyorum. Şimdi cevap verebilecek misin? Devam edeyim mi ben? Tika. Evet. Devam edeyim. Peki o zaman o sorum haklı kalsın. Biz devam edelim. Tamam. Marian bir şey mi diyeceksin?
I was going to say that perhaps this is something that she can answer in the end. We can just go ahead with the presentations and leave a moment for questions and answers in the end. Okay, so I will let you know when you have 5 minutes.
Tamam. Aslında Türkiye'de birçok yerde olduğu gibi koronayla ama daha çok da yaşadığımız politik süreçler nedeniyle kadınlar dijital aktivizm sahasında daha yoğun hareket etmeye başladılar. Şöyle söyleyelim, hani Türkiye'deki son 5 yıldaki aslında son dönemdeki en aktif gruplar kadınlardı. Birçok hareket ya işte cezaevlerine girmek zorunda kaldı ya işlerinden edildi farklı politik gruplar. Ama her durumda bütün süreçlerde ve hala en çok sokakta bulunan, en çok sürekli mücadele yürüten grup kadınlar. Ve kadınlar bir yandan da dijital platformları çok iyi kullanıyorlar. En çok da Twitter'ı diyebiliriz. Dolayısıyla biz biraz Twitter'da neler oldu bittiği konuşmak durumunda kalacağız. Çünkü hani sokağa çıktığımız her an bir şekilde geri gönderildiğimiz bir atmosferdeyiz diyebiliriz, iklimdeyiz diyebiliriz. Kadınlar Twitter'da birçok kadınlar ve feministler ve işte LGBT'ler Twitter'da birçok eylem yapmak durumunda kaldılar. Ne yazık ki en çok da şiddet ve cinayet meseleleri gündemde oldu ve son dönemde de İstanbul Sözleşmesi gündemde. Sürekli bu sözleşmeyi korumak için bütün gruplar dayanışma halinde davranmak durumunda kaldı. Peki hani Twitter'da yürütülen hareketlerden isim bahsetmem gerekirse mesela ben kendi çalışmamda işte çalışmaya çalışıyorum. Kadınların toplumsal hareketlere katılarak deneyimledikleri dönüşümler. Bunun için yaptığım görüşmelerde mesela Özgecan cinayetinin birçok gencin aktivizme katılmasının kritik sebebi olduğunu gördüm. Bunun nitekim hani dijital aktivizm sahasında çalışma yapanlar da söylüyor. Dijital sahada aktivizme katılanların büyük oranı hani daha çok gençler. Hani lise düzeyine kadar da inmiş genç grupların hani küçük gruplarda aktivizm süreçleri yürüttüğünü görüyoruz. Ya da bir takım hashtaglerle yürütülen tartışmalara aktif katılarak politik dönüşümler sağladığını görüyoruz. Ya da mesela Me Too'nun arkasından gelen o işte şeyle ilgili cinsel şiddet ya da işte tacizle ilgili yürütülen kampanyalarda yani o erişime sahip her yaşta kadının buralarda bir şekilde yorum yaparak, buradaki hashtagleri takip ederek aktivizme katıldığını görüyoruz. Bu kadınlarla yürütülen hem yurt dışında hem yurt içinde tartışmalarda kadınların hani buralara katılarak, bu hashtagleri izleyerek hem kendilerinde kişisel dönüşüm yaşadıklarını, hem cesaretlendiklerini, hem bu hashtaglerin ardından kendi üniversitelerinde, kendi bulundukları yerlerde yaşadıkları tacizleri dile getirme cesareti bulduklarını görüyoruz. Dolayısıyla hani Türkiye için, tabii dünya için de öyle, Twitter alternatif bir kamusallık sunuyor. Ve hem bir bilinçlenme sahası, hem bir güçlenme sahası, hem de kimlik oluşturma sahası olarak işlev görüyor. Ve çok da önemli olan bir boyutu hani benzerlerini bulup onlarla yan yana gelme gibi bir şey sağlıyor. Çünkü hani az çok hepimiz kendi deneyimlerimizi hatırlarsak, feminist olma yolunda başlangıçta çok da bir topluluk içinde değildik. Aslında belki bulunduğumuz yerlerin böyle dışlananları olduğumuz zamanlar olmuştur. Dolayısıyla kendine benzerlerini bulmak, onlarla merak ettiğin şeyleri tartışma platformu bulmak çok önemli. Ve gençlerin Twitter'ı böyle bir yer olarak tanımladığını görüyoruz çoğunlukla. Türkiye'deki Twitter aktivizminin son 2 yıldaki en önemli, dünyada başka yerlerden destek de bulan bir örneği Women Supporting Women. Buradaki sanırım dışarıdan, başka ülkelerden olan arkadaşlarımız da görmüştür. Kadın cinayetli oranları çok yüksek ve yaşanan son bir kritik olaydan sonra fotoğraflarımızı paylaşmaya başladık biz, siyah beyaz fotoğraflarımızı. Bu biraz hani öldürülen kadınların yerinde olabilirdik çağrısıydı, çığlığıydı. Ve giderek hani bir yandan işte Hollywood'daki ünlülerin de katıldığı, bir yandan dünyanın başka bölgelerindeki feminist aktivistlerin katıldığı bir ne diyelim eylem oldu bu. Sanırım hani bu örnekleri burada sonlandırmak istiyorum. Ama benim için bir diğer önemli boyutu dijital aktivizmin katılımcıların, özellikle genç katılımcıların dayanışma ağı kurmayı çok önemsediklerini görmem oldu. Ve şöyle de bir fark var. Türkiye'de son dönemde dijital aktivizmle harekete geçen genç kuşaklarda diyelim. Bir önceki kuşağın çözemediği, yüz yüze gelip tartışamadığı, dayanışma kurmak adına tartışmaktan imtina ettiği meselelerin dijital aktivizm sahasında ciddi anlamda tartışıldığını görüyoruz. Bence bu hani buradaki aktivizmin bize en umut verecek boyutu. Örneğin hani 90'larda ve 2000'lerde tartışmaktan geri durduğumuz dayanışma adına türban meselesinin şimdi Twitter'da genç kadınlarca bambaşka boyutlarıyla tartışıldığını görüyoruz. İşte başını açan genç kadınlar bütün o yaftalayıcı, saldırgan kuşatmalara rağmen yan yana gelip bu deneyimlerini paylaşıp birbirlerinden güç alıyorlar. Ve her türlü saldırıya karşı çok cesaretle karşı çıkıyorlar burada yan yana gelerek. Bu benim için şöyle bir şey ya da bizim için diyebilirim. Meselelerin yerli yerine oturmasını sağlıyor. Genç kuşaklar hani bir takım meseleleri böyle konuşulmaz olarak görmüyorlar. Bu dijital aktivizmin çok olumlu bir tarafı bana kalırsa. Bütün o hani saldırganlıklara, insanları tacizkar ve hani ölüm tehdidine varan şeylerle kuşatmasına karşın gençlerin bunu yemediğini görüyoruz. Hani dijital aktivizmin herhalde en bizi mutlu eden boyutu. Damla, biraz ek yapmak ister misin? Paslaşarak gitmeyi öngörmüştük çünkü. Sesim geliyor değil mi şu an? Evet. Hı hı. Yani aslında eksik bir yer var mı? Biraz olumsuz yönlerinden bahsedebiliriz. Dijitalleşmenin, dijital feminizmin, dijital feminist aktivizmin aslında popüler feminizm kavramıyla da iç içe geçmiş olduğunu biliyoruz. Ve bununla birlikte gelen kadın emeği, üretim ve yeniden üretim, neoliberalizm ve feminizmin ilişkisi gibi tartışmalar da var. Bunun üzerinden giden tartışmalar da var, burada da tartıştığımız. Belki oradan biraz değinebiliriz. Hani dijitalleşmenin feminist aktivizme olan belki olumsuz yanları. Örneğin kutupsallaşma bu konuda feminist aktivizmi çok etkiliyor. Yani bir yandan feminizm popülerleştikçe, ki bu popülerleşmenin, dijitalleşmenin bu popülerleşmede çok büyük rolü var. Ve genç kadınlar arasında çok büyük yaygınlığı var. Örneğin benim yaptığım bir çalışmada, küçük çaplı bir çalışmada genç feminist üniversiteli kadınların çoğunun feminizmi sosyal medyadan öğrendiğini çıkartmıştım. Bu sonuca varmıştım. Bu yüzden birazcık o tarafa da bakmamız lazım. Olumsuz yönlerine de bakabilmemiz lazım. Çünkü önceki dönemlere baktığımız zaman, işte dalga diyebiliriz buna, işte feminizm dalgalarına baktığımız zaman şu an yeni bir dalgada olduğumuzu söyleyenler de var. Ve artık bu dalgada basılı yayından çok dijitalleşmiş yayınların sözü geçiyor gibi bir şey oldu artık. Sosyal medyada insanlar feminizmi öğreniyor, sosyal medyada toplanıyor. Toplantıların nerede yapılacağına kadar sosyal medyada karar veriliyor ve bunların duyuruları da sosyal medyada yapılıyor. Bunun tabii ki veri açısından çok büyük eksik yanları, kötü yanları var. Yani toplanma yerlerinin korona öncesi toplanma yerlerinin orada duyurulması devlet şiddetinin de kadınların devlet şiddetiyle karşılaşmasına da sebep oluyor direkt olarak. Yani siz nerede toplanacağınızı yazdığınız zaman toplantınızda bununla da yüzleşebiliyorsunuz aslında. Bir başka yanı internete erişimin olmadığı mekanlarda kadınların feminist aktivizme ulaşamıyor olması. Zaten temel sorunlarımızdan birisi de bu bence. Diğer yandan da feminizmin bir yandan popülerleşirken karşı tarafında yükselmesi, yani mizojininin de giderek yükselmesi ve kutuplaşmanın artması diyebiliriz. Benim ekleyeceğim galiba bu kadar bu konuda. Bir ek daha yapabilirim belki. Türkiye'de şu an en çok feminist aktivizmin yoğunlaştığı yer şey demiştim, maalesef ki cinayet meseleleri. Bunun için kurulmuş bir hani kadın cinayetlerini durduracağız platformu var mesela. Ya da şöyle, bu platform bir yandan çalışma yürütüyor, bir yandan da hem iktidardan gelen kuşatmalara karşı gün be gün neredeyse işte çocukları koruyoruz, bir yandan kadınları koruyoruz, bir yandan işte 6284 gibi yasaları koruma durumundayız. Yani biz ilerleme değil, savunma durumundayız. Hani bir yandan cinayetleri takip ediyoruz. Cinayetler çünkü cinayet sayılana kadar bile kadınların sıkı bir takip yapması gerekiyor ve bunu da hani Twitter en büyük aracı. Yani şu an hem bir alternatif kamusallık aracı ama hem de aynı zamanda bir hukuk aracına dönüşmüş durumda Twitter. Çünkü hani biri kayboluyor, bu mesele ciddiye alınıp dava haline getirilmesi kadınların ciddi mücadelesini gerektiriyor. Korona nedeniyle hani o mücadele sokakta yürütülemiyor ama Twitter'da hani ciddi bir mesai harcanıyor. Hadi tamam, bu kabul ettirildi. Ondan sonra her bir dava için sürekli bir gündemde tutma çabası. Ve bunu hani kadın cinayetlerini durduracağız platformu sırf bunun için, bunu takip için enerjisini harcayan, bünyesine de birçok genç kadını katmış bir platform. Ama bunun yanı sıra Türkiye'deki feminist hareketinin neredeyse büyük bir emeği buraya akıyor. İkinci emek de dediğim gibi yasaların korunmasına akıyor. O kadar ki hani SEDAV gibi çok temel bir metnin tartışıldığı bir yere düştük. Neyse ki kadınlar çok ciddi anlamda yan yana durdular. Hani buna sadece işte daha muhalif yerde duran kadınları değil, şeyleri de daha muhafazakar yerde duran kadınlar bile ses çıkarmak zorunda kaldı. Ve bütün bu elde ettiklerimiz Twitter üzerinden yürüdü. Hani dolayısıyla bir hukuk kazanma, hukuku geri kazanma yeri olarak dijital aktivizm bizim için bu dönemde ciddi hayati bir anlam taşıyor. Negatif yanlarından bir diğerini eksik kalmasın diye eklemek isterim. Evet, Twitter'da birilerini toparlamak, harekete geçmek, oturduğu yerde kişiyi bir aktivizme katmak mümkün. Ama maalesef ki hani o popülerlik meselesi nedeniyle genelde iş yürüyor. Hani bir olay patlıyor, onun üzerine bir kampanya yürütülüyor, bütün enerji oraya gidiyor. Ama bunun süresi kısıtlı. Yani hani bir gün, 2 gün, belki sürekli gündeme tutmaya çalışıyorsunuz ama orada da ilgi kayıyor haklı olarak. Çünkü her gününe 5 büyük olay sığan bir ülkeyiz. Dolayısıyla hani zaten o trend topikler her gün değişiyor. Ama yine de kadın mücadelesi ve feminist mücadele bu anlamda ciddi çaba harcıyor. Tabii biz yalnız değiliz bu saldırılarda. Türkiye'de son yaklaşık 2-3 yıldır özellikle Ankara'da LGBT grupların sokak etkinlikleri yasaklandı. Ama yine de yaratıcı bir karşı duruş anlamında onlardan öğreneceğimiz çok şey var. Çünkü yasak çıktığı anda hemen alternatif hareket şeylerini üretmeye başlamıştı LGBT'ler. İşte Ankara'da bir takım kafelerde bir aradayız, yan yanayız çalışmaları yürüttüler. Sosyal medya kullanımı anlamında da yaratıcılıkları gerçekten çok gelişkin. Onu söylemeden geçmeyeyim. Sanıyorum bizim Türkiye için yapılacağımız genel değerlendirme bu kadar. Ekleyeceğim bir şey yoksa Damla?
Şeyi birazcık daha açabiliriz belki. Bu bahsettiğin son şey çok önemli. Onu unutmuşum. Twitter'ın feminizmin, özellikle de aktivizmin gündemini belirlemesi çok kritik bir konu bence. Çünkü hem Türkiye'de kadın cinayetlerinin ve genel olarak kadına şiddetin, kadına yönelik şiddetin çok yüksek oranlarda seyretmesi ve son yıllarda özellikle sosyal medyanın da internetin de beraberinde getirdiği görünürlükle artık feminizmin aktivist hareket açısından feminizme yön veren şey bu gündemler olmaya başladı. Bu bir yandan çok doğal bir şey ama bir yandan da feminizmin kendi gündemini yürütemiyor olması da bir sorun. Yani Twitter'da devam eden feminist aktivizm Twitter'ın gündemlerinden yola çıkarak ona karşı bir şey üreterek ilerletiyor feminist aktivizmi. Bu da önemli bir nokta. Bunu da unutmayalım. Türkiye'de de bu sorunla sürekli olarak karşı karşıyayız.
Evet. Belki bu biraz da hani kuşak meselesiyle de kesişiyor. Birçok şeyi açıklarken kuşağa başvurduğumun farkındayım ama dijital aktivizm dendiğinde hani belki dünyada da öyle ama Türkiye'de yani ben bile hani çalışma yaparken mesela aktivizmde dijital aktivizmi ciddiye almam zaman aldı. Yani bu bir aktivizm dediğim şeyi çok sokakla ve çok orada yürütülen mücadeleyle özdeş görme nedeniyle ve biraz da kuşağı bu nedenle bağlayabileceğim bir şey. Ama şu an olduğumuz yerde hani koronanın da etkisiyle aslında gençlerin o kendi kamusal alanda onlara verilmeyen politik bir söz üretme derdini kullandıkları yer olan Twitter şimdi hepimiz için öyle bir yere dönmüş durumda. Dolayısıyla evet yani hakkını vere vere altını çizelim ki yani artık 4. dalga mı diyeceğiz, ne diyeceğiz? Hani gençlerin çok aktif olduğu bu sahada söz üretmekte çok haklılarmış ve orada yürütülen aktivizmde evet gerçekten birçok şeyi değiştirebiliyormuş. Her ne kadar uzun solukluluğu konusunda eleştirilerimiz olsa da.
Evet, yani uzun süredir zaten dijital feminist aktivizme yönelik özellikle de dediğin gibi kuşak farkı olan feministlerden çok yükselen bir eleştiri vardı. Ama koronanın şöyle bir etkisi oldu bu konuda. Birazcık sanki ortak bir platforma kavuştuk gibi. Artık çok fazla eleştiremiyoruz çünkü buna resmen mecbur bırakıldık. Daha fazla bir alanımız kalmadı şu noktada. Bu da aslında birazcık bana kalırsa muhafazakar olan yorumların önüne geçmeye başladı. Artık yani o kuşak farkını da aşmış durumdayız. Bu anlamda koronanın belki bu noktada olumlu bir yönü oldu yani.
Buradan şeye geçmek istiyorum. Biz Dünya Kadın Yürüyüşü'nün geçen yıl, 2 yıl önceki atölyelerinde bir araya geldik. Yıldız'la bir araya geldik. İşte Damla'yla, Anıl'la ve birçok başka arkadaşımız da vardı. Bir yayın çıkarma niyetiyle bir araya geldik. Ve sanırım aramızdaki en gençlerden biri olan Damla orada hani bir podcast fikrini öne sürdü. Dolayısıyla biz de daha aktivizmi sokakta öğrenen, orada olduğunu düşünenler olarak hani iyi ki Damla'yı dinledik. Ve Twitter dışında birçok başka platform var belki hani aktivizmi yürütebileceğiniz. Damla'dan öğrendik ki podcast de bunlardan biri. Şimdi ufak ufak bizim podcast maceramıza geçmek istiyorum ama önce Damla bize biraz podcast nedir anlatacak.
Önce podcast nedir belki bilmeyenler vardır. Onlar için kısaca bahsedeyim. Podcast aslında radyoya çok benziyor. Eski kuşaklarında yani burada ayrımcılık gibi oluyor mu bilmiyorum böyle söylediğim için ama daha radyoya alışkın insanlar için de hemen adapte olabilecekleri bir şey bana kalırsa dinlerken. Sadece tek farkı her şeyin indirilebilir içerik olması, her an istediğiniz yerden, istediğiniz zamanda tıklayarak dinliyor oluşunuz. Aslında radyodan farkı bu. Ve biraz daha kısa ve yapılandırılmış bir şey olması. Tabii bu sizin tercihinize göre değişir. Eğer başka bir podcast yapmak istiyorsanız tamamen kafanıza göre 2 saatlik hiç yapılandırılmamış podcastler de yapabilirsiniz. Böyle podcastler de var ama ben genel olarak 15-20 dakikalık başı ve sonu belli olan bölümlerden bahsediyorum podcast derken. Sadece dinleyebileceğiniz ses kayıtları aslında. Podcast çekme fikri aslında bana yurt dışında çekilen podcastleri görünce böyle bir şey aklıma geldi. Aslında birkaç yıldır, belki daha fazla, daha uzun süredir özellikle Batı ülkelerinde yapılan bir şey podcast. Çok fazla feminist içerik de var bulabileceğiniz. Ben İngilizce olarak dinlediğim var ama İspanyolca da duyduğum var. Eminim başka dillerde de şu an özellikle çok fazla podcast vardır. İngilizce podcastler dinlerken fark ettiğim şey Türkçe hiçbir içeriğin olmamasıydı. Bu aslında bana birazcık ilham verdi diyebilirim. Ve bir başka sorunum, dert edindiğim şey de feminist toplantılarda ya da kendi aralarımızda yaptığımız buluşmalarda konuşmalarımızı kayıt altına alamıyor oluşumuzdu. Bunu kayıt altına almanın çok önemli olduğunu düşündüm. Bunun yolunun da en pratik olan çözümü bana podcast gibi geldi. Çünkü video çektiğinizde o videonun boyutu bir kere çok fazla, daha uğraştırıcı bir şey. Ve özellikle feminist aktivizmde bir yandan da akademik bir şeyler yürütüyorsanız ki hepimiz öyleyiz. Yani Zeynep, ben ve Anıl arkadaşımız podcast'i yürütenler. Çok daha pratik bir yol olduğunu keşfettik podcast'in bu açıdan. O yüzden arşivleme açısından çok güzel bir yol olduğunu düşünüyorum. Örneğin gidemediğiniz şehirlerdeki yapılan feminist toplantıların arşivleri var podcast olarak. onları dinleyebiliyoruz. Örneğin İstanbul'da ve Ankara'da mor mekan var. İstanbul'daki mor mekanda, bunlar feminist buluşmaların yapıldığı mekanlar. Orada yapılan toplantılar kayıt altına alınıyor ve podcast olarak sunuluyor. İstanbul'a gidemediğim için ben örneğin evimde açıp bunları dinleyip feminist tartışmaları, orada dönen, ilerleyen tartışmaları takip edebiliyorum. Aslında podcast'in en güzel yanlarından biri de bu. Birincisi arşivleyebiliyor oluşumuz. İkincisi de coğrafyanın hiçbir öneminin kalmıyor oluşu. Herhangi bir ülkeden dilini bildiğiniz bir podcast'i dinleyebiliyorsunuz. Ve çok pratik dediğim gibi. Ve bu şekilde biz de podcast'e başlamış olduk aslında. Türkiye'de de ilk örneklerinden biri olduk. Bunun için de çok mutluyuz. Böyle.
Ben de istersen podcast'ın adı ve o yani adını çok seviyoruz ya. Adını söyleyip hani nasıl yaptık, nereden bulduk onu söyleyeyim. Dediğim gibi ama önce biz bir araya hani Yıldız'la birlikte Dünya Kadın Yürüyüşü Ankara grubunda yürüttüğümüz atölyelerde bir araya geldik. Bu atölyelerde yani toplamda 11 atölye yaptık. Hani birçok o dönem feminist grupların gündeminde olan tartışmaları biz de işte Ankara'da bir araya gelerek konuşuyorduk. Aslında hani konuyla ilgili yazmış çizmiş birileriyle bir araya gelerek konuşuyorduk diyelim. Sonrasında hani biz gruptan yani grup dağılınca biz de senin önerinle bir araya geldik. Ve Filiz Bingölçen'in Kadın Argosu sözlüğünü karıştırdık. Ondan sonra Deli Asiye bizim çok hoşumuza giden bir ifade oldu. Geldi gitti. Deli Asiye ne demekti? İşte çılgın deli kadın. Hani burada bulunan hepimizin, küresel ölçekte hepimizin sahiplenebileceği bir isim. Hani hem böyle bir deyim hem de Asiye adının kendisi de bana her zaman asiliği çağrıştırıyor. Bilmiyorum sana da öyle mi? Dolayısıyla hani birçok yüzüyle bizim sahiplendiğimiz işte Asiye nasıl kurtulur'a da referans verebilen bir addı. İşte böyle referanslarını bol bulduğumuz ve çok kısa sürede bulduğumuz bir addı. Peki ne yaptık biz? İşte aslında biz biraz bu meseleyi şeyle dert ettik. Çalışma sahalarımız üzerine çok konuşuyorduk. Hani Damla yüksek lisans tezini popüler feminizm üzerine yapıyor. Anıl'ın sahası farklı ama ilgileri bizimle daha ortak. Ben de dediğim gibi daha öncesinde toplumsal hareketlerin, özellikle feminizmin kişilerin dönüşümüne, politik ve kişisel dönüşümüne ne gibi şeyler getirdiğini anlamaya çalışıyordum. Dolayısıyla biz şeyi konuşurken bulduk kendimizi, hani bilinç yükseltme meselesini. Hatta biraz da böyle o 70'ler ilk doğuşundaki bilinç yükseltme meselesini kıskandığımızı bile söyleyebilirim. Yani hani biz çünkü biraz daha belki ya medyadan ya Twitter'dan ya da bizim üçümüzü kesen şeylerden biri de akademiden feminizmi öğreniyor olmamızda. Dolayısıyla hani akademiden değil de kendi hayatlarımızdan türettiğimiz ama işte ne bileyim akademiyi de sokağa da buluşturduğumuz bir bilinç yükseltmenin peşindeydik. Onun hayalini kuruyorduk. Podcast bu anlamda bize çok güzel olanaklar sağladı. Çünkü hani bizi delirten kişisel mevzularda, buna evlilik dahil, bir sürü politik mevzu da aslında gündemimizdeydi ve bunu tartışırken kaydettik diyelim. Yani bazen önden çalıştık, okuduk mesele üzerine, bazen de okumadık, dertlerimizi paylaştık. Tam bir bilinç yükseltmeye uygun şekilde sanıyorum. Dolayısıyla toplamda onu da mı 11-12 tane yaptık sanıyorum. Konularımız nelerdi Damla, hatırlatmak ister misin?
Aslında çok başlığımız var ama bence şey yapalım Zeynep, yavaştan bitirelim çünkü 3 dakikamız varmış.
Tamam.
Bitiyor galiba süremiz.
Zeynep, özür dileyerek hemen başlıklarınızı
Sorry.
söyleyebilir miyim? Açık
Can I
önümde şu anda.
Tamam, çok iyi olur.
Hatırlat, çok iyi olur.
Evlilik ve feminizm.
Sorry sisters.
Feminizm yolculuğumuz nasıl başladı? Göçmen kadınlarla saha deneyimi, bisiklet ve kadın, mazbatayı alan kadınlar.
Devamı var ama galiba YouTube'dan bakıyorsun. Orada hepsi yoktu.
Evet.
Ferrante romanlarını, Napoli romanlarını konuştuğumuz, bunun üzerinden kadın dostluğunu konuştuğumuz bir ne diyelim oturumumuz da olmuştu. Şu an.
Aşk 101 Sinan.
Evet.
Sinan, burada mısın?
Çok güzel, sağ olun ya. İzlediğimiz Aşk 101 dizisi üzerinden hani ona ilişkin LGBT bireylerle ilgili tartışmalar da çıkmıştı ama biz bir yandan da hani lise deneyimlerimizi hatırladığımız bir program olmuştu. Görebiliyorsunuz.
İstersen sorulara geçelim.
Evet, tamam.
Tamam.
Sonrasında podcast yapacağız değil mi?
Sorularla yapacaktık ya podcast.
Tamam. O zaman şöyle.
Ona geçelim.
Herkes hazırsa konuşmaya bir podcast yapacağız birlikte demiştik. Damla'yla bütün bu 2 günlük eğitim sürecine ilişkin aslında sizi konuşmaya itebileceğini düşündüğümüz 2 soru hazırladık. Fakat podcast'te şöyle bir şeyimiz oluyor. Hani podcast'in girişinde bir konuyu söylediğimiz, bitirişinde de bitirişini hatırlattığımız bir kısmımız ve yaklaşık 15-20 dakika mesele üzerine konuştuğumuz bir yer oluyor. Dolayısıyla şimdi podcast'e başlayacağım Damla. Bugün 3-4 Ekim'de yaptığımız dijitalleşme ve feminizm konulu ne diyelim çalışmanın son saatlerindeyiz. Ve hazır podcast'ten bahsetmişken hep birlikte böyle bir deneyimimiz olsun istedik. Yani Dünya Kadın Yürüyüşü'nün bir de podcast olsun istedik. Oturumu olsun istedik. Deli Asiye olarak da bunu paylaşacağız. Bir yandan da bunu YouTube kanalında da görebileceksiniz. Ve biz 2 soru belirledik. Bu 2 günlük dijitalleşme oturumuyla ilgili olarak. Soruları soracağız ve dileyen arkadaşlarımızın kendi kanallarından yorumlarını yapmasını isteyeceğiz. Birinci sorumuz şu. Bu 2 günlük akışta size yeni gelen, sizi çok şaşırtan, farkına yeni vardığınız ya da tekrar hatırladığınız için mutlu olduğunuz kavramlar nelerdi? Aklınıza bir şeyler geliyor mu? Damla senin geliyor mu? Kimse konuşmazsa biz konuşacağız.
Benim senden de öğrendim, onu kaçırmışım. Zeynep'ten öğrendiğim bir ifade var, bir kavram var. Right to disconnect. Bu gerçekten...
Sofi'yi selamlıyoruz. Bu kavramı
evet.
Sofi'den öğrendik.
Evet, bu kavramı ilk kez duydum bu bu atölyede. Ve bence çok işimize yarayacak bir kavram. Yani adını koyamadığımız bir sorunun adını koymuş oldum aslında. Başka
Türkçesini
örnek verebilecek var
mısın kavramın?
Türkçesi aslında bence şey olarak çevrilebilir. Çevrim dışı olma hakkı.
Evet.
Evet. Yani internette olmama, çevrim dışı olma hakkı bence en iyi çeviri olabilir. Çevirmenler tabii daha iyi bilir şu an ama.
Evet. Kavramın kalbimizi çalmasının sebebi de tabii mesela ben öğretmen olarak hani hafta içi hafta sonu işte akşam 11 falan demeden artık her türlü telefona yanıt verdiğimi, Sofi bu kavramı söyleyince birden evet ya falan diye düşündüğümü hatırlıyorum. Peki katılımcılarımızdan böyle bir şeye katkı sunmak isteyen olur mu? Ben şuna çok heyecanlandım. Bu çok değişikmiş falan diyen. İsim söylerim. Konuşmak zorunda kalırsınız.
Bence Gönül konuşacak.
Gönül wants to speak.
Söz vermenizi bekliyorum.
Göremedik. Buyurun.
Evet, çok konuşuyorum bu arada bugün fark ettim de diğer konuşmacıların da fikri olabileceğini ama söylemek istemediklerini düşünüyorum şu an. Neyse ben söyleyeyim hemen bugün aklımda kalan 2 gündür aslında birçok kavram duyduk yeni. Ama beni en çok birincisi veri kapitalizmi kavramı çok şey yaptı hemen. Gerçekten öğretici veri kapitalizmi. Biz hep kapitalizmi diğer işte gündelik yaşamda gördüğümüz şekliyle işte biliyorduk ya da işte kapitalizmin bizim üzerimizdeki şeyleri, ama veriyi de kapital bir sistemin içine aktarma kısmı hakikaten bundan sonra işimizin zor olduğunu gösteriyor. Özellikle kadın sağlığı konusunda da veri almaları meselesi üzerinden. Diğer bir kavramda tarım beyni. Kavla, bu iki kavram da Kavla'nın bugün anlattıkları içerisinden. Hani tarım, hayvancılık, gıda vesaire üzerinden düşündüğümüz zaman işte biz veganlar ya da vejeteryanların genelde işte hayvan hakları üzerinde konuştukları, işte besin maddesi olarak kullanılmaması gerektiği üzerinde konuşmalar oluyordu. Ve işte süt için ineğin sürekli hamile bırakılması, bunları biliyordum ama işte ne zaman, diyelim işte hayvan ne zaman gebe kalacak? Bunu bile önceden bilmek çok korkunç gelmeye başladı bana gerçekten. Bunların da artık veri dünyasında, dijital teknolojilerde bu şekilde yaşıyor olmak beni korkutuyor.
Teşekkür ederiz Gönül. Evet.
Ben de söz almak istiyorum.
Evet.
İçinde tasarım, kullanım, yapay zeka ve gelecekteki dijitalizasyon stratejilerinin içerisinde yer almak fikri çok heyecanlandırıcıydı. Yani biz dünyanın her yerinden kadınlar dijital bir ağ kurup, dijital ağ üzerinden birlik içerisinde bu alanların başlangıcında, yani dijital değişimin başlangıcından itibaren neler yapabiliriz? Nasıl dahil olabiliriz? Alternatiflerden konuşuldu mesela. Bu alternatiflerin önündeki engeller neler? Yapılabilecek kişiler kimler? Daha çok nasıl dayanışabiliriz? Bunlar benim için çok önemliydi. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Teşekkür ederiz. Yeni bir soruya geçmek istemiyoruz. Evet, Marianne.
Do you hear me? Yes. Okay, so I think that one important concept for me today was data extractivism, because this is a very powerful notion to show that actually what capitalism is doing to us and to everything now is to extract data and extract value, as it has been doing historically to nature and to women's labor. So I think this is a powerful concept that we need to remember as a takeaway point for today.
Teşekkürler. Var mı başka?
İstersen diğer soruya geçelim. 2 sorumuz var zaten. Bu sonuncusu.
Evet. Ama şey açısından iyi oldu, hani kritik kavramlar için bir yandan sözlük hazırlandığını biliyorum. Hani sözlüğün İngilizcesi mevcut. Muhtemelen biz de kısa sürede o Türkçesini edinmeye çalışacağız. Çünkü tartışmalar yürürken gerçekten bilmediğimiz birçok şey olduğunu, hani bir yandan bir kavram deryası, bir yandan da çok gerçek, hani hepimizin önüne düşen şeyler olduğunu düşünürsek o sözlüğü Yıldız herhalde kısa süre içinde çevirmeye çalışır mıyız? Ne dersin? Evet, Yıldız gülümsüyor. Çalışırız demek istedi galiba. Şimdi o zaman ikinci soruya geçiyorum. Dediğimiz gibi sizi konuşmaya dahil etmek için biraz genel sorular sorduk özellikle. Daha çok kişiye daha etkili biçimde ulaşabilmek için, yani sözü yaymak için sosyal medyayı nasıl daha etkili kullanabiliriz? Yaratıcı fikirlerimizi paylaşır mıyız burada? Bu konuda Brezilya'nın çok deneyimi olduğunu duyuyoruz, takip ediyoruz. Dünya Kadın Yürüyüşü sayfasını da çok etkili bir şekilde kullanıyorlar. Bize ilham oluyorlar. Belki paylaşmak istersiniz. Tika Marianne'i gösteriyor galiba. Marianne Tika'yı gösteriyor olabilir. Tamam. Kimi dinliyoruz? Evet, Tika'yı dinleyeceğiz.
Eu tô te dizendo, eu tô ativando o seu. Olha lá, vai. Você tá... Ah, o 2, tá. Espera aí.
Helena'yı dinlemek
Es que eu
istiyormuşuz
estou...
sanırım.
Ai, foi. Tica foi.
Evet, Helena.
Helena? Ah, tá. Espera aí. Espera. Y Elena, sí, vai.
Ahora estoy, ¿me escuchan? ¿O tengo que cambiar de...?
Está bien.
Está bien, está bien. Hola compas, bueno, Tica me pasó la palabra porque como hacemos todas esas cuestiones juntas, entonces así compartimos un poco con más distinción de quién habla. De facto tenemos mucha creatividad en Brasil ahora. Mucho de eso ya había antes de la pandemia, fruto de incluso de muchos años y décadas de construcción de comunicación popular en los territorios, pero igual la situación de estarmos más aisladas y teniendo que compartir informaciones, compartir visiones de lo que está pasando y formas de reorganizar nuestras formas de estar juntas, afectó mucho eso de las iniciativas creativas para la formación, para la información de las personas de fuera, etcétera. Eso siempre está acompañando acá en Brasil nuestras acciones de solidaridad por el tema de alimentación, de máscaras, de información, un proceso de solidaridad que está siendo muy importante también para nosotras pensar cuál es el papel, el rol de la solidaridad como eje de lucha, de feminismo, de solidaridad de clase. Eso ha sido muy importante, sigue muy importante porque seguimos en acción de solidaridad permanente porque la situación está muy, muy grave acá, con mucha pobreza, mucho desempleo, etc. Bueno, y de otras cosas que ustedes hablaron por ahí, sobre Ángela, que Ildis nos preguntó. Bueno, Ángela está en un proceso de creación. Las compañeras militantes del activismo digital están programando en ese momento, Ángela, entonces aún no tenemos cómo pasar el enlace, pero estamos creando este enlace de la marcha a principio en las Américas, pero que queremos que esté en las varias regiones y eso tenemos que construir juntas, o sea, evaluar juntas si lo más correcto es que estemos todas en Ángela o en otros servidores para que tengamos más conexión, porque todo el proceso es hecho por personas militantes, incluso el proceso de tener las servidoras. Y sin las servidoras no podemos hacer nada. Es que es tan invisible ese proceso todo, como en el Zoom, por ejemplo, que a veces no tenemos mucha dimensión de todo el trabajo manual que está en eso, pero sí, la idea es que en algún momento luego tengamos todos acceso a Ángela o algo muy parecido a ella. Y otra cosa también sobre lo que planteaba la compañera sobre la cuestión de la juventud en las redes. Yo estoy en las redes y veo muchos desafíos allá de cómo hacer, porque al mismo tiempo que vemos que hay un gran interés por el feminismo con las chicas más jóvenes, mucha identificación, incluso porque son formas de responder a muchas formas de violencia, etcétera, que pasan por la vida desde muy chicas. hay una forma corriente de practicarlo que es peligrosa porque individualiza, porque parte de nociones de empoderamiento que son muy personales y no colectivas. Y bueno, por eso que todos ya sabemos que no necesariamente sirve para una organización que sea más permanente, que sea más amplia, incluso en la relación intergeneracional, que por veces parece que el feminismo es solo de las jóvenes y que se inventó ayer. Y entonces esos son algunos desafíos que aparecen, incluso por la aparición tan constante de las grandes empresas que hacen sus propagandas, su maquillaje lila, que además de cooptar el feminismo para ellas, también rebaja, banaliza lo que tenemos de feminismo nuestro en general. Entonces, por ahí van nuestras dificultades. O sea, hay grupos de mujeres en redes sociales para hablar de problemas personales y que eso puede muy bien ser una puerta de entrada para fortalecer la creación de vínculos entre mujeres, y eso es algo potente. Pero tenemos esta gran tarea como movimiento organizado de mujeres desde la Marcha Mundial de las Mujeres, de hacer que este vínculo inicial primordial entre mujeres se vuelva en autoorganización, en formulación política, que nos lleve a construir un otro mundo, o sea, que tenga formulaciones antisistémicas, radicales, una agenda política por entero. Eso sirve también para pensarmos lo que son las movilizaciones feministas que ocurren de tiempos en tiempos y que son muy potentes, pero que pasa una semana y no vemos mucha continuidad, o sea, no hay mucha permanencia de organización. Entonces, y lo que necesitamos en el feminismo, más que grandes movilizaciones, es organización muy grande, masiva, amplia y permanente. En las redes, entonces tenemos estos desafíos tanto del intergeneracional, que es una grande cuestión, especialmente para nosotras de la marcha, que tenemos mujeres de las más distintas edades y de las más distintas localidades y territorios, y las cuestiones de clase también, y en eso creo que estamos pensando desde Brasil, y veo que ustedes ahí también con las ideas de podcast, etcétera, de maneras de hacer una comunicación que realmente sirva para conversar entre nosotras con las mujeres que están involucradas en los procesos, y no solo con ganar más likes o poner la hashtag que va a tener muchos tweets que después no se vuelven en práctica política concreta. Creo que eso es la cosa que nos viene guiando mucho en el colectivo de comunicadoras. Y solo para comentar de la iniciativa de podcast, es muy bacán podcast. En Brasil estamos haciendo un podcast ahora en las Américas, porque es desde Brasil y con la... ¿No está funcionando? Para cerrar, sí, obvio. Tenemos una experiencia llamada Furia
Güzel
Feminista.
haberi verdin ve kapatıyorsun.
You can finish what you were
Sí,
gonna
eso.
say.
Me encanta.
Wrap up.
Me encanta el nombre que ustedes dieron al podcast que están haciendo ahí, y nosotras, el nuestro también es muy radical, se llama Furia Feminista, y es muy bacán hacerlo junto a la Radio Mundo Real, que es una iniciativa de comunicación popular y que nos hace también ampliar los públicos y hacer más vínculos, no solo de comunicación, pero políticos. Entonces, qué bueno que están haciendo eso también por ahí.
Tamam, çok teşekkür ediyoruz Helena. Gerçekten güzel haberi de sonunda vermene çok mutlu olduk. Günün birinde belki Furia Feminista ile Deli Asiye buluşur, kim bilir. Hani birlikte bir şey yaparız belki. Sanıyorum süremizin sonuna geliyoruz. Teşekkür ederiz. Hem bütün emek veren arkadaşlarımıza, bütün sunumlara çok teşekkür ederiz. Hem dinlediğiniz için, sabrınız için teşekkür ederiz. Tabii son söz olarak ben kendi adıma bir şey söylemek isterim. Sonra da Damla bitirir diye düşünüyorum podcast'i. Evet, dijital feminizm diyoruz ama katılımcılardan dün sunum yapan arkadaşlardan birinin dediğini unutmamak lazım. Sofya'ydı yine galiba. Biz kadınlar hani çok uzun süre sokağa çıkmak için, kamusal için, birçok şeyde var olmak için yola çıkmıştık. Hala öyle. Bu talebimiz hala geçerli. Evet, dijitallik, dijitalleşme o saha çok önemli. Ama hani biz aslında geceleri sokakları, meydanları istemeye devam edeceğiz. Damla.
Podcast'imizin sonuna geldik. Bizi YouTube'dan, Spotify'dan ve podcast'in yayınlanabileceği bütün başka her yerden dinleyebilirsiniz. Görüşmek üzere diğer bölümde. Hoşçakalın.
Thank you, Zeynep. Thank you, Damla, for this very nice. I think you introduced very well the wrap up, actually, because we were able to recap many things that we had discussed today. Thank you very much. Right now, we have 16 minutes, and I was asked to bring up a little bit of discussion on what would be the next steps after this workshop. The first thing that we would like to do is to announce that we will have the closing of the World March of Women action very soon, in a few weeks. So we will make all of this discussion and the video of the discussion public in the website of the World March of Women. And this will be a very important tool for us to build progressively a collective vision on that. We also wanted to say that it became very clear to us that it is important that we have further training processes in this topic, that these 2 days were not enough to cover the complexity of the challenging things that we have, and also to elaborate more on the alternatives that we need to build or that we are already building from our movements. So one thing that we can say is that we can commit ourselves to organizing further training on this topic, hopefully with more and more sisters from other places, and hopefully engaging also those let's say movements also that are engaged in other practices related to technology. And we have also more hands-on training on that. Also, Turkish sisters have mentioned that there is a desire to have a publication that can help us synthesize the debates that we have had here, but also perhaps inviting other contributions. And our idea is that we make a publication in English and in Turkish, and perhaps in another language, perhaps in Spanish, we would have to see. But we are committed to put in effort to do that as a way of moving forward. So I don't know if Ildis wants to jump in, but I also would like to thank all the sisters who gave their time and energy and weekend to be here and to give us training, political training on that topic. Thank you for the Sisters for IT for Change. Thank you for the Sisters of Brazil. Thank you for the Turkish sisters and everyone. It has been a very nice moment, and hopefully we will see each other again. Ah, yes, and then there is a photo. Please, everyone turn on the cameras. Ildis, do you want to say something?
Yeah, it was very intense session for 2 days. In fact, it is more intense than we expect. And thank you very much for all presentations. They were all very useful to understand our future work and to decide new strategies very soon. They were very fruitful. It was a nice weekend of think tank for us. Sometimes it's not just an action in the streets. We need to sit down and think over the situation, developments, and to see. And something what I have noticed for 2 days, we have a younger women here debating, discussing. Maybe it is a good topic to bring young women's energy, activism, and dynamism into the movement. Yeah, this is what I want to say.
Okay, so should we take the picture? Yes. Who will do it? I don't know if. Wait, I can
Kenan'dan
try.
yine dünkü gibi rica edersek.
1, 2, 3. Okay. Kenan, can you take the picture, please?
Olur mu acaba? Kim çekiyor? Ses
I
verebilir
think
mi?
it's done. Yeah, okay. Thank you for the interpreters. Very big applause for the interpreters, without whom we would not be able to communicate. And teşekkürüm.
Kenan duyuyor bizi bu arada. Fotoğraf alıyor sanırım.
Evet, evet.
And see you soon, hopefully.
YouTube yayınını bitirebiliriz sanıyorum. Marian.